All right, Nick is here, so let's just let him in. All right. This podcast is brought to you by Gridiron Heroics Media.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome, one and all, to the Gridiron Heroics Football Show. I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxDean. And today we are live to talk about some news, to talk about some team building strategies, specifically whether you have a quarterback, whether you have a identity as a team, or whether you have both or neither, potentially, and our thoughts on that. We are going to be doing some injury updates with Dr. Kyle Trimble, and then we are going to be doing a preview for Thursday night football with Rashad Beard of the Panthers Nation podcast. So that's the schedule for today. We're going to jump right into everything. First, let me introduce Nick Merriam, my co-host for the day. Nick, how you doing?
Doing well. Another week, another batch of games, a lot of... it's going on. We're getting end of November. Things kind of die down a little bit because college ends, and that's the most of the games. But so I'm looking forward to that. But until then, it's the grind continues.
Oh yeah, and to do the news today, we have Julius Luchs. How you doing, Julius?
I'm doing well. As Nick said, best the grind doesn't stop. The grind continues. So just kind of getting through it one day at a time. But everything's all good on my end.
All right, so let's jump right into it. We've got slide that over. So, we're still kind of getting the hang of going live with everything. And that is going to be what we do consistently. We're going to be doing our 3 live shows per week. Monday, recap. Then Thursday, kind of our bigger picture episode. And we're going to obviously have news and injuries every single week. And then Sunday is going to be our preview show. So we're not doing that Friday anymore. We're going to be doing it Sunday live in the morning, right before the game. So we have a big show today. We're looking at probably about 2 hours and 15 minutes or so right now. So let's jump right into news for the day. Julius, you are our tidbit presenter. So what tidbits do you have for us?
We're taking it to Los Angeles to start off with. Matthew Stafford is now in concussion protocol. It is understood that he suffered the head injury during their loss to the Buccaneers last week. However, the symptoms did not kick in till during this week. The status for Sunday is uncertain.
Yeah, that's not good for the Rams, although they haven't been playing well otherwise. So, I think they've kind of played themselves generally out of contention. I think you might have some wires crossed there, Julius, by the way. Is it still John Wolford? Is John Wolford the backup quarterback, Nick? Do we know?
I actually don't know who the backup is. I should look that up. I mean, I know they had Bryce Perkins, who was the Virginia guy, was playing in preseason for them a little bit. I don't know if he is the guy. No, it's Wolford. Perkins is third string. So what's going on there? That's me.
I think that's Julius's. Julius gets wires crossed for sometimes.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll fight through it. We'll figure it out. I find this interesting how when we hear about Stafford injuries specifically, like it seems they always are kind of like after the fact and like, oh, he's a little beat up, but he's gonna play this week. I don't know. It seems like they need him to play because the team's not been good, but he's like quietly been kind of beat up over the past year and a half here in LA, and has just had to kind of play through it.
Yeah, man. I mean, I had a kind of a bad feeling when the news of the tendonitis in the elbow came out this summer. It kind of seemed like a lot of people shrugged it off, and that he's a tough guy. He'll play through it. I mean, Nick, you've been an athlete. Julius, you've been an athlete, and I think we even talked about this specifically. Julius and I, tendonitis is very, very painful. Like it's like you can play through it, but it's distracting. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Like I've had it in my elbow before, just from like a summer of playing a lot of baseball. It's like I couldn't even do it. Like when I would have a flare up, I couldn't even play. So I don't know. I mean, so there's that, and then the concussion thing just seems like in addition to that. But I don't know. It seems like we've got more going on with Stafford than meets the eye, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll say with tendonitis, like especially in contact sports, like that's a big one that you're just like, all right, painkillers, whatever, you go with it. You're not, unless you really mess up your elbow, you're really not going to make it any worse, although it might hurt more the next day.
Mm-hmm.
You do all this self-care routine stuff and recovery things to make that better, and hope that you just don't hit your elbow the wrong way to make it worse. But concussions, obviously you can't really make an argument if it's bad enough that you shouldn't be playing that you can play. So hopefully for his sake, it's not at that point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to get really excited about the Rams at this point, whether he's playing or not, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, they're in a weird spot for sure.
All right. What else do you have for us today, Julius?
Safety Jonathan Abram has found a new home. The Packers have claimed the former Raiders safety off waivers. He is now 27th overall pick in the 2019 draft. He was waived Tuesday. He is now on the Green Bay Packers.
This is weird timing. It seems like this is probably one of those situations where he was upset with how the team is performing and probably being vocal about it. He's always been kind of an emotional type of guy with the way that he plays, and I'm guessing that they were like, look, let's just move on from this.
Do we know if he's going to become a receiver now?
Yeah.
No word on that.
Yeah, I don't think safety was the main issue there. I guess that's fair as well.
This is another team that just, cool. You got Jonathan Abram. It's a tough spot. I mean, the Packers and Rams. We talked about we compared the Rams to Tampa last week. I think the Packers and Rams are probably better comparisons for each other right now than even Tampa is. Because at least Tampa has like talent, and if they can get it together, maybe they'll win some games here, and in a bad division, win that division. I'm not sure like Packers or Rams have the talent to really do much this season right now. It's not a good spot to be in, and a box safety who probably should be playing on third downs is not going to really fix it for them.
Yeah, no, I agree, and we're going to have some bigger conversations about some of those teams. It's going to be kind of offensive focused today. We're talking about quarterbacks and what it means to be a good offense, and what it means to have a quarterback that runs your offense, and what it means to embrace the quarterback that you do have. So we will be talking about that in a bigger picture format soon. But yeah, as far as Jonathan Abram's concerned, I mean, he's a perfectly fine player. He's, probably not the type of safety that's a difference maker in today's NFL, but as teams are running the ball more this season, certainly doesn't hurt to add him to the roster. But yeah, another piece of news that affects two teams that probably played themselves out of relevancy this season. Julius, you have any further news for us today?
Yes, just a quick update on Josh Allen. I know you guys are going to cover that eventually, but he is currently listed day-to-day with the right elbow injury that he suffered. Sean McDermott's just simply said we'll see in terms of his status for the upcoming game. He was not present in Wednesday's practice.
Yeah, so we will talk about that with Kyle a little bit later on today. When I spoke to Kyle about that briefly, the word he used was there are a lot of theatrics. So I'm not really sure exactly what that means, from his perspective, but we shall see. Purely speculating based on that kind of sounds like that means he's gonna. I don't know if he's implying that he's gonna play, and they're just trying to over dramatize it, or they're trying to make it sound like he'll play just so the other team has to prepare for him. I mean, I think that's probably slightly more likely, but we'll find out further details on that a little bit later. What else do you have for us, Julius?
The last chunk of news for you is just our players of the week that we like to go over. So Justin Fields won NFC Offensive Player of the Week after he rushed 178 yards in a 35-32 loss to the Miami Dolphins. This was a new standard for the most rushing yards by a quarterback in a regular season game, passing Michael Vick in 2002. He ran and scored a touchdown, threw 3 touchdowns, completed 17 of 28 passes for 123 yards, no interceptions. For the AFC Offensive Player of the Week, Joe Mixon had a great day for fantasy owners. 5 total touchdowns, 4 rushing, and caught one in their 42-21 win over the Panthers. Mixon had 211 scrimmage yards in their win. Linebacker Justin Houston for the Ravens and AFC Defensive Player of the Week, 3 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, game-sealing interception, and he has had multiple sacks in 3 consecutive games, so he's pretty much on fire at this point. Kirby Joseph, NFC Defensive Player of the Week, racked up 10 total tackles, 3 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, and this was in their upset victory over the Packers. And, that was quite the game to see. Jake Camarda, the NFC team Special Teams Player of the Week, a 74-yard boot, franchise tying record. Also, 4 of his 6 punts reached the 20-yard line, averaging 54.2 net yards per punt. And last but not least, AFC Special Teams Player of the Week goes to Cameron Dicker, connecting the 37-yard game-winning walk-off field goal to win against the Atlanta Falcons.
So we're going to be talking about Justin Fields here in just a moment. That's going to be one of the bigger points of our conversation. How about the Ravens with Justin Houston? Do you, if you guys don't remember, Justin Houston got the free agent tag, I believe it's called, put on him like way late in the offseason, basically at the beginning of the summer, because he was just out there unsigned, which means he went back to the Ravens for like a couple of $1 million. I have to check exactly what the total is, but all of these teams that need pass rush help, and Justin Houston is just available out there for, basically the veteran minimum almost. So you always got to be impressed with what the Ravens are doing.
Justin Houston now 110.5 career sacks for his career, passes J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones on the all-time list with those 3 games these past 2 weeks, and is now 38th all-time. Quietly, like, a really good career, and I don't think we're talking about it enough, probably.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he kind of came on, if I remember right before Andy Reid went to Kansas City, and then he had a really good, like, core prime of his career, kind of as Tamba Hali his career was ending. So he was kind of the big guy there for a while, and then I don't know why teams don't value him. I really don't. You know what I mean? He's just been a late addition now 2 years in a row, and he just keeps producing. And we talked about this prior to this upcoming game. We talked about it prior to the game that he just played against the Saints on Monday Night Football with Splash. Like, they have accumulated such a nice variety of pass rushers, especially now that Tyus Bowser is back, now that David Ajabo is back, now that they brought in JPP in kind of a very similar fashion very late in the game, and he's just being effective. Like, they have quite the defensive front, and Roquan Smith as an addition there. I feel like this Ravens team is kind of transitioned from being like slightly underwhelming defensively to quite good. But anyway, I really like what they've done.
He's only played in 6 games this year and only had starting designation for 1. He's got 8.5 sacks, which is very good. And also he had a 22 sack season back in 2014. If he gets to 11.5, it's going to be his second best season in terms of sacks in his career. And at age, what is he, 30 something?
Yeah, he's been around
33.
for a while.
Good stuff. I mean, that's the type of above expectation production if you're Baltimore that helps you contend for a Super Bowl.
Yep, absolutely. and he will continue to provide that. I have no doubt. There's no reason to expect him to fall off. All right. Do you have anything else, Julius? I do believe that's the news for today.
Nothing else to report for you.
All right. Well, let everybody know where they can find you, and we'll have you back on next week. Hopefully, slightly in a more slightly smooth fashion to start the show off. But yeah, shout out your Twitter and where your work is.
So you can find me at GotJuice44 on Twitter. GotJuice44 on Twitter. You can find me on the Gridiron Heroics website. Just search at my name. I'm there. And then on Facebook, you can see the articles I post for myself, Julius Luchs.
All right. Sounds good, Julius. We appreciate you, and we will see you soon.
Take care.
Thanks, Julius.
All right. So today's conversation, Nick, is inspired by you. You wanted to talk about what it means to have a quarterback, what it means to have an identity, and how few teams actually have both. And my interpretation of an identity, especially offensively, really means how well do you embrace what the strengths and weaknesses of what your quarterback are, and how effectively, do you present that offense to opposing defenses. So I have some clips here. The three that I have a little bit more in terms of footage of are the Miami Dolphins, the Chicago Bears, and the New York Jets. And then I also have a couple of other clips that are a little bit shorter that I would say kind of summarize some of the other offenses, which I feel do a good job of embracing what the quarterback does and giving them a clear identity. So which one do you want to talk about first?
And we're picking between those three teams. Let's start with the Bears because they are the big development this week, in my opinion, because I think I'm very happy about the direction of Justin Fields' current state in that offense.
Okay. So jump into it, and I'm going to start playing basically some all 22 of their more successful offensive plays from this past weekend. And I believe that anything that you want me to pause and go back on, if you're kind of watching while you talk, I can certainly do that.
Yeah, so there has been tons of discussion about why doesn't Chicago use Fields more in a designed rushing function of that offense. And I think to a great extent, they had used read option a lot. And the thing about read option is we call it a QB design when the quarterback does keep it in our grading at SIS, but it's really not a quarterback design play. Like if you call 12 read option plays, your quarterback's probably keeping it on 3 of them. Probably. Most of the time you are giving it because, I mean, just simple math here. You have 5 offensive linemen where the running back's going on inside zone. On a keeper, you kind of need the lane to open up from a player crashing down. Miami does a lot to scheme that open, and they use that for throwing lanes. But in this case, the Chicago now, they're saying, you know what, we're not just going to use read option. We have to have design runs. In this case, this is a scramble from Fields, which is also something in his game that I think they've expanded upon. He has extended plays a lot throughout his career. He's not been the best so far at kind of doing this Deshaun Watson-esque extend and throw the ball. But when you can, there's an RPO right there, take advantage of his ability to quickly operate through read option and RPO and then allow him to extend plays with his legs and then say basically, hey, we want you to run when the play breaks down. He is clearly, I mean, he scored a touchdown on, I believe, a scramble this week. Clearly, that's a big part of the game. But we're also seeing kind of, quarterback sweeps, quarterback counter, quarterback draw, stuff like that. That is effectively just saying, look, this guy is going to be a running back in our offense to some extent. And it's interesting when we've seen quarterbacks early in their careers run as well as he has. It's usually translated to high production immediately. Like we saw with Lamar Jackson, he came out and had like 120-yard run games, like right off the bat. And now that Fields is running, we're seeing in all facets of his ability to run read option, design runs, and scrambling, he's been over 100 yards, I believe, 3 of the past 4 weeks.
Yeah. So okay. So I briefly touched on this on Monday as well. The conspiracy theories that I presented you, I don't even know if I 100% believe them. I just don't have an answer as to why teams didn't go after this guy in the situations that they were in. There were a bunch of quarterback needy teams, and this guy is an elite traits player, a truly elite traits player. And when I wanted the Jets to draft him in that draft, second overall, it's because I envisioned this as a baseline for what he could do. If you bring a player like this in as a rookie, you give him a floor for what your offense can be. You don't have to have him reading full fields. You don't have to have him dissecting defenses. You can basically design run plays and formulate offense that utilizes just like a built-in skill set. And then over time, he can develop reading the field better and better and better. So some of these plays that we've been watching so far, now that they've finally embraced doing that, you see how much the defense has to crowd the line of scrimmage because of his threat as a runner. It opens up some of those RPOs, like that RPO that you shouted out where he hit the ball to the sideline to chase Claypool, and then he just ran for it. There was nobody there except for his man defender because everybody was all basically right at the line of scrimmage. So not only do you have the run option in the RPO, it forces the defenses to respect the run option, that it actually opens up the passing option much more so. Here's another designed run for him, which is very effective. I mean, as long as he's not taking a lot of hits. Yeah, exactly. He's such a natural runner, and he didn't do it that much in college because that offense was just easy for him to operate. But it's like if you just watch any of his scrambles in college, he's such a natural runner. He's such an easy athlete. So, and then here we go again.
Just easy read option. That's for him. That's easy. It's 10 yards because you have that speed. And we saw bootlegs too on a couple plays. I think that it's underrated how good of a play fake quarterback he is. Really does sell that run very well. But that kind of simplifies the game for you as well. When you're running a bootleg, it's a half field read, usually high-low. He's done a good job with that. I'd like to hammer home the fact that this guy's problem to so far has been the translation to full field reads and decision-making from that point. Other than that, like, he really doesn't have a lot of flaws. Like, he's an accurate quarterback. If he knows where he needs to throw the ball, he's going to deliver an accurate ball. They've just had problems kind of running from sets like this at a shotgun, making decisions. Here he gets the ball out quick, which is, I think, a good sign for his game. And I think too often we see a quarterback like him, like, all right, he's big, he's accurate, he's got a strong arm. Let's do some complex stuff. Let's help him develop as a pocket passer. Maybe we never need to run him. Whereas if you run this guy and you make the offense simpler for him, he's going to develop that decision-making just by running, simple NFL concepts that I really think might even be in some ways more complex, or at least more similar to what you need to do in the NFL than what he was doing in college, which is a lot of pre-snap, recognize what half of the field you're throwing to, and then, make a read versus a safety and a couple corners with your two receivers and running back. And you have obviously, a Garrett Wilson or, a couple of first-round receivers that are going to be open.
And then here's a play where I really like, because once you've got him feeling comfortable and confident, this is when he can start making plays like this. This is a beautiful pass on a fade. I don't think you could really put it any better. I really don't. And you'll see some more plays where he starts feeling himself right there. That little play there, the little pump fake right there. And then this is his biggest run of the day. Like that is a quarterback who is playing very confidently. And the design of the offense has done that for him. You know what I mean? Like I don't think the Bears are a complete enough team right now to be a contender this year, but now that they've finally put themselves in this position, they know where they're going next year. You know what I mean? They know what they want to be and what they can add.
He gives them a shot at the wild card race this year. It's wide open, and I think he's playing that well right now if this continues, and I think it will. Look, we had a Thursday night preview that went on far too long where we talked about Justin Fields forever, and my whole thing was like, this guy is way too good of a quarterback, just in terms of, it's not just traits. Like, we see toolsy guys come out. We're going to talk about Will Levis a ton this year. Yeah, he's toolsy. But again, accuracy is something that, unless you're Josh Allen, can't be taught. Footwork is something that can be taught, but it's not a problem with his game, right? Like, he has pretty consistent footwork. He throws from a nice base. His throwing motion is nice. He throws a beautiful ball, like tight spiral. Thing is easy to catch. I mean, you look at that thing doesn't look like it's moving. And I know that's an easy throw, but still, it's pretty consistent with him that he's throwing these tight spirals that dip in the air. He's been well developed as a quarterback prospect. It just, the translation of the NFL game hasn't happened. And to me, like, it was a matter of time. And I was concerned that Chicago wasn't going to be the place to figure it out with him. And I think it's huge and a testament to that coaching staff that they have found a way to get him feeling comfortable. Because let's be honest, like, this isn't an offense full of talent, like you said, but they actually have pretty good run blocking unit right now. And to say, look, this is what we're good at. We need to just commit to this and do that in a league that kind of asks you not to these days. Although there is more too high. So we're seeing a little bit more. And, you know, they're scoring on play action. They're running for 200 yards a game. They're using multiple running backs. They're getting jet motion involved. In a lot of ways, they've gone kind of the way of like a Shanahan offense. And, you know, it's interesting because my whole thing with him coming out is I thought he was also going to be a better fit for the Jets offense than Zach Wilson. I don't know if it's easy to say at this point because I think Zach Wilson, we still don't have an answer on if he's good or not yet. But look, this is what I imagined Fields to look like when he makes it in the NFL. And I think the Bears should be excited because this is, look, again, like, not a talented football team. He is playing well enough to help to have them competing, in my opinion, what it was a top 6 team in the NFL, probably maybe top 5 with the Dolphins.
Yeah. Well, I think they went toe-to-toe offensively with the Dolphins team that is lacking defensively, and that is something that's kind of a major point of contention surrounding the Dolphins right now. But still, I mean, like, look, that right there, that's a good pressure, and he just made something happen. You know what I mean? Like, he basically made the defense wrong. Right. Like, there's only a few guys. I mean, Mahomes, Allen, Fields. Herbert's a good mover, but I don't even think Herbert puts that move on. There's only a few guys that can escape like that. Like, Zach Wilson can do that when he might turn around and then lose 5 yards on, trying to make the next guy miss, but he makes the first guy miss like that. But there's like probably maybe 4 or 5 guys in the NFL. Kyler Murray, obviously, Lamar Jackson. There's like maybe 5 or 6 guys who can do that kind of make that kind of move. So here's the thing. I don't know about them contending for a wild card spot. I think they put themselves a little bit behind.
They're a game back.
That's crazy. The NFC is that wide open. The Commanders are like a game back. Like,
I think the Bears are better than the Commanders, by the way. Like, I think there's maybe a gap even. I can't believe we beat them. That's just, if they are running this offense right now against Washington, I don't think Washington beats them.
You know what I'm frustrated by? The fact that it took Justin Fields actually showing something before they even attempted to make an offensive move for him to add him a weapon. Now, I not only do I not love that, I also think that it kind of put the team in a position where they, I think, overpaid for what Chase Claypool brings to the table. Like, I like the fit. I don't really like the cost, but why now? Why did you not do something in the offseason? Like, were they that out on Justin Fields, or like, was their opinion that he had to show them something before they even made the effort? Like, as much as we're giving them props for how they've approached the situation now, why did that take so long?
So I actually didn't dislike what I saw from Fields last year. There's a chance that they came into the season and they were like, all right, there are some good signs. Let's see if he makes a jump year 2. Preseason went pretty well. And maybe you build up your defense, get some pieces there. If your quarterback's good enough to be your franchise quarterback, usually, not in all cases, especially if you have, somewhat competent offensive coaching, you can tell regardless of what's around them, unless it's an absolute disaster. And It seems like it might be at times, but I don't think their roster is an absolute disaster on offense. They have some young offensive linemen. They have Darnell Mooney. They have nice running backs. Maybe it was a stretch to say that that was enough for him to show anything. Like, he could have very well not, and they would have been in trouble. But I just think that the staff that came in was not against the idea of, oh, if we're bad, let's just draft another quarterback. And then, if a guy ends up being good, despite everything you have there, you're not going to feel bad about where you are, because now they're like free to draft whatever, in my opinion. If they actually think he's the guy, it just takes a big load of burden off of your general management staff's ability to just acquire talent. Because when you don't have that quarterback, as we've seen, the transactions you make to try and acquire that guy are just out of left field. Usually, a lot of resources being sunk into a guy that needs to work out. If he doesn't, you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball. Your roster's worse. You have to pay money normally to keep guys around. So, I think it was just them hedging against the fact that, like, they needed to get that position right before they got anything else right.
I get it, but I understand that, but that's almost like,
I'm playing devil's advocate. By the way, I agree with you.
yeah. Well, I think the thing is, like, that makes sense on a certain level, but you're also, like, kind of extremely lucky right now that he's playing as well as he is. I mean, based on the effort that you made to help him out, you're making it significantly less likely that he will develop. You know what I mean? And it almost seems like they didn't make the effort to make things easy for him, despite the other moves, just based on the way that their offense was designed for the first few weeks of the year. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Sometimes you got to give a new staff and everybody a little bit of time to figure things out. So I'm not trying to be too hard on them. It just, I was pretty disappointed with how they approached the entire offseason, just knowing that you have a player with this kind of talent and not really making the effort to try and, like, you know what I mean? Because it's house money if he's good. And if he's bad, then it's not your fault. But you should at least, like, gamble with the house money. That's kind of how I see it,
Yeah. I mean, you might worry about this guy ends up being, an average quarterback, good enough to get you 7 wins a year. And then you build up your roster. And now you're contending for a wild card spot every year, and you're not bad enough with this guy to, like, get in a position where you can upgrade the quarterback, but then you're not contending for Super Bowls. And I think they have an analytics inclined GM. I think a lot of analytics people worry about being stuck in a situation that effectively, the Raiders or Washington are in right now, where there's too much talent outside of quarterback to get the quarterback, but also they're not good enough in recent years to get, like, a free agent or someone by a trade that, like, really wants to go there. And not that they were close to that point. Like, you would have had to acquire quite a bit of talent to be a 7-win team, I think, outside of, Fields played poorly. I think this is probably like a 4 or 3-win team. But I don't know. It's an interesting discussion because we talked about in the past, like, you would rather be picking top 5 than picking top 15.
Yeah.
I mean, this is them maximizing their tail ends of outcomes.
I get it. I understand that, but I also think that it's like, you don't give yourself a lot of credit as a creative team builder if, like, the only way that you feel like you can ultimately win is to suck bad enough to get a quarterback. I mean, I understand that process is in place because, it does help even out, it helps create the parity, but also it's like, if you have house money, you should use it. That's just how I feel.
Frank Wright and Chris Ballard, by all accounts, have acquired a lot of talent there in Indianapolis. They have brought in some quarterbacks, some not as good, some pretty good. And Frank Reich's out because they didn't get the guy who was a long-term quarterback solution. And he's a very good coach. And I think it's very unfortunate that's the state of the league, but here we are.
Well, I also think that the Colts, look, Carson Wentz was a bad decision.
Yes.
Carson Wentz was just a bad decision. And it's like, you know what I mean? You can point to the idea that that they weren't bad enough to draft a quarterback, but also you could just realize that that was a major miss. You know what I mean? And they put themselves in a position where they chose to do that instead of trying to make an aggressive trade up in a very quarterback-rich class. I mean, they could very well have been the team that aggressively traded up for Justin Fields in 2021. They were in prime position to do that. I think, if I remember right, I think they were even drafting maybe one spot ahead of the Bears in that draft. We're talking about a couple of years ago, but like that's a move you can make, right? So I don't know. I'm just saying there's always an avenue. There's always an avenue. And that's my approach to team building personally.
You have to be willing to take swings at that position. And just it's scary for teams because, and especially if you have a coach as a GM, which Washington effectively does have, and coaches I think tend to be a little more conservative these days than GMs do. You have to pull the trigger. Like if you see a guy who it's tough because you gotta want to work with the guy, right? And I think there are more instances of wanting to work with players than finding players who are really good. Because I think Malik Willis by a lot, Ron Rivera talked so glowingly about working with Malik Willis at the scouting combine and at Senior Bowl. I believe he was at Senior Bowl, and just how much they liked talking to him during, their whiteboard work. And I think to a great extent, they really did like him, but clearly they didn't like him enough to take him with the top 100 pick, So I think that happens. I think it happens a lot. Sean Payton, I was told a story about Matt Menacherian, who's one of our scouting staff people at SIS, about how Sean Payton fell in love with a quarterback. I believe it was TJ Yates. And the scouting staff is like, well, he's not good. So it doesn't matter if they want, but you need to have a quarterback that is both good and your coach wants to work with. And in some ways, you kind of have to have the latter 100%. Like you need to work with the guy. The former, it's complex because how good is good enough, right? Is he a Kirk Cousins level player? Is that worth a top 10 pick? In some cases, I'd say like what you got from Mac Jones last year was probably the baseline of like, he needs to be this if you're going to commit picks and trade up for a guy. Because I thought Mac Jones played pretty well last year before, the downfall of this year. But it's complicated. I mean, I think back to RG3, his rookie season, very talented, obviously, like was one of the best players in the league that season, probably. And they didn't want to work with him. So it didn't matter. It did not matter. They wanted to work with Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins was the guy Mike Shanahan drafted in the 4th round, kind of despite Dan Snyder, who traded up for RG3, prevented them from trading for Peyton Manning, but that's a whole other story. There has to be continuity to work with a quarterback, and he has to hit a threshold of talent. And too often, I think teams go and think about the talent thing a little too much, where it should be, oh, here's Fields. Maybe it takes him a little longer than we think to be good, but he clearly has, enough talent to be a top 11 pick in the draft. And if we like talking to the guy and we think we can work with him, you got to trade up. Even if you're not like 100%, if you're 80%, you probably need to take that shot because it's just, if you don't, you're going to be stuck with Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke, and Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a proponent of trading up for a quarterback in the draft. I am, because I think that the zone where you're probably going to be able to find a guy that will be a legitimate starter. And yes, it's hard to know exactly which one it's going to be, but the kind of the range where those guys are available. And if you are a team that's just good enough to not be there naturally, you can get there. And we've seen that time and time and time again. So anyway, let's move off of Justin Fields here for a while. I do like that even though I'm giving them a little grief, I do like that they have seen the light, so to speak. They've transitioned their offense to more effectively suit him, and they went out and made a move to bring in a guy who fits well within the scheme. You can put Chase Claypool ISO'd out there, and he can make a guy miss due to his size and his speed, and that is a nice piece. He's big enough to be a blocker in the run game, whether that be the quarterback run game or otherwise. I do feel like he's kind of like their flex tight end to Komet as the
Yeah.
Y tight end now, and I
He's
like the fit. I really do.
he's an H-back, right? Like, he's an H-back who's going to play wide more often than not, and you can bring him in tight formations, and he can block. And he's done this like tight end jet motion, jet sweep thing for the Steelers too. So
Mhm.
it's really fun when you start thinking about like formationally how you fit players who are unique. Claypool is unique because you can line him up. It's not like college jumbo where they're just throwing a receiver in there because they don't trust to put a tight end, in the game who knows what he's doing. It's like, no, this guy is a receiver that you can motion in next to a jumbo offensive line. And you've gone from, there's a threat of a guy who can catch a deep ball off of, a play action play to now this is like a real blocker. And if we're not in the right personnel to deal with it, they're going to maul us back on duo and pick up a couple of yards when they need it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like it. I really do. I really, really like that fit. I mean, he's an H-back who runs a 4.4.
Yeah.
And jumps out the gym. And yeah, maybe that doesn't translate to contested catches necessarily, but get him the ball, which I think is the better way to use him. And he can make things happen just out of pure athleticism. All right. So next one I'd like to talk about is the same game, but the opposing offense. So let me pull this up real quick. Let's do screen share, and I've got the Dolphins here again, an assortment of plays for the Dolphins offense, what Mike McDaniel has done with Tua Tagovailoa and the weapons they have there. Now, this is a little bit different because this does favor Tua's strengths, but also, to me, a huge part of what they do is just predicated on how dynamic their receivers are. I mean, you'll look at the way that they're forcing the Bears to play defensively. And it's so hard to commit to covering anybody aggressively because as soon as you do that, you just leave yourself susceptible to an explosive play from one of the others. So you just see it here. I mean, Tua is just shredding the zone defense of the Bears. Just as soon as a guy is coming open, he's getting the ball there. He's very, very accurate. You see the ball, it doesn't necessarily travel with hyper speed, but the anticipation is more than enough combined with the accuracy that, it's just wild to see the stark difference in how the two offenses operate. But here's another one too, where it's like the play didn't work, except it worked because it's defensive pass interference, which gives you the ball on the goal line. You know what I mean? So it's like there's such a threat from what they have there, but they're using it very, very, very well. You know what I mean? Like it's not a guarantee just because you have good players. I want to give them credit, but it's just such a different way of approaching a successful offense.
So we know Kyle Shanahan loved working with Kirk Cousins and obviously Jimmy Garoppolo now. I love comparing Tua to those guys because I think he kind of combines, at least right now, some of the better qualities.
Has such a perfect spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He just combines the better qualities of the two of them, adds some mobility, subtract some arm probably, but he has the quick recognition and the accuracy of Kirk Cousins, but he also has kind of the comfortability in this West Coast offense of Garoppolo that I don't know that Cousins always has had, plus kind of the daring that Garoppolo has and Cousins less has to push the ball down the field into tight windows, despite not having it's not quite Taylor Heineke just floating balls out there into quadruple coverage, but just not having really the best arm in the NFL. I would argue right now among starters, like you can make an argument outside of Heineke, he doesn't really have a better arm than anybody else.
Well, yeah, I mean, anybody I would say he has probably one of the weakest arms as an actual starter because even Heineke is really a backup. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think of all the guys that are slated to start, he's probably in the bottom 5 just in terms of just throw power, but the anticipation and accuracy really helps that out. And the fact that his guys get very consistently open and you trust the offense.
Yep.
You see, I mean,
it's the same thing with Burrow. His arm isn't great either, but it's closer to the middle of the pack. I think you can cut down time the ball gets to the hands of the receiver by recognizing the right read earlier and going through a quick throwing motion, which I think Tua also has the ability to kind of set his feet and throw very fast. it's the kind of quick twitch quarterback that I think. I don't want to say Brady made, because I don't think he's not like the quickest twitch guy either. I just think he's just extremely safe and picks his decisions downfield out really, smartly. But they haven't had a lot of poor decisions from Tua, even so. And when they've been like mistakes that lead to interceptions, it's a lot of times like his arm failing him. It's just, he can't get the ball there because he doesn't,
like,
he's not.
Even right here, that is a runaway touchdown if that ball is let out in front. And you don't want to. He lives within his means so effectively, but also you got to realize the only reason that I don't feel that he's a real MVP candidate, in my personal opinion, is because if you are not having receivers who are just so consistently open and explosive, this offense just doesn't work the same way. You know what I mean? Like you're instead of like a dinking and dunking type of attack that's consistently giving you like 25 plus yard explosive plays, though that dinking and dunking is giving you like 8-yard plays. And then you just have to be so much even more perfect. It just looks wildly different. Like I just feel like if those receivers weren't on this team, then nobody would even be considered. Like people might still be praising him for living within his skill set, but I just don't think anybody would even consider him an MVP type of candidate. So I think that narrative it doesn't make sense to me based on like the phrase most valuable player. But again, it's working extremely, extremely well.
He's got college open receivers instead of NFL open receivers. He can trust on outbreaking routes that a guy's going to have 5 yards of separation and not 2. And because of that, it's not even throwing a ball before a break. It's like throwing the ball before the guy gets to the break.
I will say that was a pretty impressive throw, especially once you see it from the end zone angle. This is pretty impressive. But yes, I agree with you. Go on.
Just trying to figure out what coverage this is. This looks like, I don't know if that was 6, but
I can go back on that and play it again. But yeah, I mean, like he's got the mobility, and he's not a wild athlete, but he's effective. You know what I mean? Like he can throw on the run, and he's that throw is probably kind of risky, but it's the placement is quite impressive, and that takes athleticism. Whether you're rocketing it there in the same way that a Patrick Mahomes would, maybe not, but still the placement is very hard to make on that move.
Yes,
on the move like that.
They flood the cover 4 there. It looks like that's a third window throw too. So that's, I mean, but you're taking a risk throwing that ball. I mean, you got to have some guts to rip that.
Yep.
I don't know if you've seen Seth Galina's kind of 7-minute breakdown of how this offense is run. It's very interesting. I recommend it. But
I'll check it out.
They're doing a lot of read option with trips to one side and then jet motion out of the trips to kind of bring people across. And they're creating kind of that. I'm trying to see if they're going to use it at some point here. This might be an expanded version of it, but they don't have a running back, so it can't be. But what they do is when you have that guy in jet motion and you can bring 2 other receivers across or on a beneath route, have that jet motion guy run a wheel and then have like a vert on the opposite side. You give yourself kind of that triangle against single high that gives you 3 options to throw. And then they have the read option inside zone. So it's a 4th option. And then
Tua has point out here that they straight up got a matchup of Tyreek Hill on a linebacker right here.
Yeah.
This is, I don't know how you let yourself get into that situation, but
And I think on that throw, you can tell like Tua doesn't even rip it because it's just so clear that Tyreek's going to get more separation than he would immediately. Might have had Gesicki on that play there. But Tua has enough mobility that he can pick up, 7 yards and slide off a read option if you give him that space. And it is just enough to keep a defense worried about it to the point where it really does open up a lot of possibilities for this offense. Throwing a lot of bootlegs. Again, like the bootleg has helped when you have a guy who can run. And he's not running the ball a lot. But if defenses were to start sitting back here way deep to the point where, if you don't let these guys, Waddle and Hill, get behind you, you're probably giving up 15 yards of scrambling ability just because of how deep you need to get to cover those guys.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, and you see there's another pass interference to basically close out that game. But the spacing that they create for themselves in the run game, you can see it clear as day. I mean, teams just want to sit back far away. I mean, that's empty, so it's probably not a very good example of that. But because of those plays, teams just don't really want to crowd the line of scrimmage. They really can't do it. So you open things up for yourself as far as men in the box, and it's not just in the box, it's how aggressively they're playing their line of scrimmage.
Look how wide the D-line is on their splits. And that's because they're worried about the read option and him getting outside and then having that time to deliver a ball downfield. Because the more time you buy, not only are you giving him time to think, but here's that trips read option book, right? Except for they're just going to hand it off. Or they're going to do play action. So again, like you run play action, the whole defense gets flowing one way because they're worried about that read option. And now you're bringing the play across to the other side instead. Even though you have that jet motion, it's actually to the right side of the field. And that little shoulder flip is kind of going to give the safeties the cue the other way. And that play was close and it was good defensive. Well, it was pass interference.
Well, it was actually pass interference.
Yeah. But, I mean, again, like that's the difficulty of covering this team. And I think, again, that might have been jet
Here's
motion
a good
as well.
one. Here's I like this. So there's pre-snap movement. You get everybody flowing to the left, and then you just...
They just have so much to worry about. Here's no trips look, but again, they're not going to have a guy in the backfield, so they're definitely throwing. Yeah. It's so quick how the secondary has to expand on these plays. Look at the flats on these plays. He doesn't throw it to either of them. But if you throw the flat, it's 7 yards, easy. And I think that the challenge for Tua is to decide when to, because he probably could take 7 yards every play, but they're looking for touchdowns, obviously. Here again, jet motion, play action, could have thrown it to the flat again and got a ton of yards. And I don't think they necessarily want him to, because quite frankly, you can just rely on, with that time that's created through the run game, defense on their back heels, you're going to get that window with a Jalen Waddle or a Tyreek Hill.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I couldn't cut up. I couldn't cut up just every single play. I didn't have time. Yeah, exactly. And just because there was a limited amount of time to prep everything, and so I picked the more explosive plays. So you don't see a lot of the setup stuff, like the 4-yard run, the 8-yard run. But I mean, like the crazy thing to me is that they're just hitting a 25+ yard play once, or at least once, if not twice, on every single drive.
Yep.
So all right, so we can move on here because I only have one more that I want to focus on, and we don't have to spend quite as much time on it, but I want to let me see.
I want to talk about Zach.
I'm not even really going to talk about Zach as much as the idea that the Jets are really making the effort with their offense to do.
You're more familiar with this offense than I am. So you go ahead here, because I'm interested to hear what you got to say about it.
Well, here's basically, I selected a specific drive, and it's the series to end the game. And at this point, the Jets are backed up to their own 4 off of a really nice punt, and they are just going to run the heck out of the ball. And I think that, that's just a bad missed tackle right there, and just taking advantage of it. And that what's that?
It's a good play by the running back too.
Yeah. It's nice. It's a nice moment, but it's also not what wins this drive for them. It's all of these other plays after the fact. But this run game has been set up all game for these guys. So when it came down to it, they played situational football, knowing that they needed to basically force the Bills to spend all 3 timeouts. And yes, they ended up giving the ball back after a field goal with a little bit less than 2 minutes, but no timeouts with a very, very aggressive defense. And so they understood that even if they didn't end up if they didn't get points off of this drive, that this was still more important. And they end up throwing the ball when they have to, but they just, instead of trying to get cute, they just keep going with it and going with it. And then I think we can probably skip ahead to kind of the key moment here. So that's it right there, where they finally throw the ball when they have to. And it's just a nice, easy pass on a slant. And this maybe isn't necessarily the perfect summary of the entire Jets offense, but what they've done is they've surrounded this quarterback with a run game, running backs. I mean, as soon as they lose Breece Hall, they go out and get James Robinson just because they want that stable of guys. They have all of these receivers who can make plays without Wilson necessarily having to do everything himself. I mean, you've got Braxton Berrios is a guy who can make things happen by himself. You got Garrett Wilson is a guy who can make things happen by himself. Elijah Moore is a guy who can make things happen by himself, even though he's not really being used right now. You've got Denzel Mims, a guy who can make things happen by himself. And I just they give the ball to Wilson to try. They try to score there, but they at least want to make sure that they keep it in bounds. But it's just I like that they're just embracing the idea that, you know, whatever we do with our quarterback just needs to be for him, not, you know what I mean, not the expectation from him. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to make another Jimmy Garoppolo comparison here because I think that's kind of where this offense is. Although the Jets obviously run a little more gap scheme, and they have a little more of a power element than Miami, I guess. Wilson can be Garoppolo for them if he just stays within himself. And we saw that. We texted about the New England game last week, and I watched that game and I thought, we're probably overreacting a little bit about Zach Wilson. 3 turnovers, 2 of them were really not good. One of them less concerned about, but I would say even of the 2 that were definitely on him, one, he was trying to throw the ball away and just made a really poor effort play to get it out of bounds. There were some throws in that game that if you just if you can just protect the football, you come away from that game thinking, wow, that guy's, it's not even like Mark Sanchez. Like it's like legitimate. This guy's doing what they're asking him to do to win this football game. And in my opinion, coming out of that, I don't know how you can't feel better about his ability to develop than Mac Jones, who just wasn't hitting passes and wasn't making decisions consistently that gave New England a chance to win. And, New England needed a penalty on a pick 6. There are, by a lot of metrics in that game, if you go back and you look at what normally decides football games, yards per play, outside of turnovers, the Jets probably should have won that football game. New England kicked 5 field goals, usually not a way to win a football game, and they managed. Jets were in the red zone multiple times, had a couple turnovers. It's just, it's a big home game against a rival. The fans are all excited when you take the lead in the first half. It looks like you're going to win, and then your quarterback makes some bad plays late. The fan base is going to be upset, it's not a great. I'm just thinking right now, if Washington were to draft a guy who gave him an opportunity against Dallas and he threw the game away in the fourth quarter, people would be freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say it's too early because we definitely need to see steps from Zach Wilson. But when a guy comes back the next week and then beats this team, who is better than the Patriots, markedly better football team, Buffalo, I think it shows you what he's made of. He's look, he's not a franchise guy yet. We got to see a little more, but it's not panic time with Zach Wilson. And I think a lot of people kind of committed to panic time. And I would say we're not at that point, because he is very much capable of this decision-making, short accuracy based quarterback play, which maybe is not what he was billed as coming out of college, but this is a West Coast system. They're asking quarterbacks to be that. They're asking them to be Tua. They're asking them to be Jimmy Garoppolo. They're asking them to be Kirk Cousins. And then if they're going to go beyond that, that's going to have to be something they figure out on their own. And in Wilson's case, it's kind of the Aaron Rodgers, like, you need to figure out everything else. And then if you get comfortable with that, the plays, extending the play, setting your feet outside the pocket, making these kind of broken play, impressive throws downfield, that'll come along. But you have to get comfortable within the offense. And that has to be the message for him going forward. And I think he's very capable of it. And I think this game shows you why.
Well, I mean, over 70% completion percentage against a Bills defense that's, obviously very, very good. I think I wanted to point this out just because I really like how they've been using their 2 tight end sets, and it's different than a lot of other teams. I mean, you've got Uzama, who, had a pretty good season as a receiver last year, but he's really almost their designated blocking tight end at this point. Then you got Tyler Conklin, who's came over from the Vikings last year, and he is basically their designated receiving tight end. He didn't have a ton of touches this week, but he played really well last week. But I mean, this run play is really won because they made those investments. I mean, that's a nice block by Uzama against the defensive lineman there. And I just, when you watch this unfold, especially as you get towards the end zone, you've got a situation where you're on 3rd down. I think it's 3rd and 5, and the ball is exactly where it needs to be and when it needs to be. And that was every opportunity for a quarterback who you're worried about to overthink it, to make a bad play. You know what I mean? Feeling like everything's on his shoulders on that, but he just puts it exactly where it needs to be. They put the ball in his hands on the next play. He makes sure he doesn't go out of bounds. I mean, this is not really meant to be necessarily an homage to the game that Wilson played, but more to the effort that they are going to make sure that this is easier for him. Mm-hmm. Last week, it didn't go well for a couple of reasons. I mean, for one thing, Belichick is generally able to take away what you want to do, which is run the ball. And the timing was awful that they lost Breece Hall and Elijah Vera-Tucker leading up to that game, because it means that you're putting in a tackle that you brought in off the streets in Abway to be your starting right tackle. There's really no chemistry with the offensive line yet. You know what I mean? But a week goes by, they kind of get everything ironed out. They get James Robinson more comfortable in the system. And they're able to get back to what they want to do. But I think, whether or not this game is a perfect example of it, I think it is a good example of it. But it's the efforts that they have made over the past couple of years to build an offense that doesn't rely on the young quarterback. And so I think that he can be a good quarterback. I really do. I think he has some demons versus New England because he threw 4 interceptions for them in like a quarter last year as a rookie. And then he got hurt against them and missed time in their second matchup. And so I think they've just been living in his head for, the past 9 months or 12 months or however long it's been since that matchup. And it didn't go well. And that's a maturity thing. And hopefully he has a bounce back game against them after the bye. But I just think that generally speaking, this team has made such a concerted effort to build around him and take off of his shoulders. And I think, that is what you need to do when you draft a guy high and you know that it's going to take some work and you want to work with him, but you just have to make this effort. You have to put all of the resources into taking the load off of his shoulders.
I would say we know at this point the most important things for quarterback prospects to look for are accuracy and decision making. And too often people confuse decision making with avoidance of failure. Like, oh, he threw the ball away. Nice. He took the 3 yards on a scramble. Like, he took the easy yards. It's more than that. It's also taking advantage of, aggressive openings in the defense and finding those 10-yard, easy throw, not as easy throws, and completing them. Zach Wilson is too aggressive in his decision making early in his career, and they're dialing it back. And the more you see that, the better it's going to be, not only for the offense, but here's the thing. I honestly don't know that it's a bad thing for him to be too aggressive early, because when you have a guy like Kirk Cousins who is not aggressive enough, it doesn't really change, right? He makes decisions that are good, but he also just more often than not is going to take the 4-yard curl route. He's going to take the flat route, and you're not going to get those downfield passing plays except for off of play action. And so you can be an offense like Minnesota that runs the ball a lot, does a lot of play action, and then, manufacture those deep shots. But, then people know what your tendencies are. They know what you're going to do, right? And you can kind of prepare for that. And the Shanahans don't like, they're very much about mixing it up and doing all sorts of, and obviously this is a LaFleur's, but it's the same scheme effectively. They want to mix it up. And Wilson's, again, it's more of a Garoppolo nature of wanting to take those more aggressive throws. They just need to dial it back and just say, hey, man, like, they're not all good decisions, but if you make the right ones and then figure out when it's probably not as good of an idea to shove that ball into a 12-yard hole, that's covered up, he's going to be fine. And I actually think his floor is high enough at this point that with the talent they have, like, I don't think it's fluky they're 6-3. This is like a good, going out James Robinson. Like, James Robinson, in my opinion, is more than a starting level running back. And now they have him as like one of 2 guys that I feel pretty good about. This is a good football team. They're in a good spot. It's going to help Wilson. They'll go as far as he improves. The fact that they're not asking a whole lot from him right now is the best thing for him. And he just needs to take advantage of those, like, important situations like he did against Buffalo, because that's where it's all about confidence. When you gain confidence in the simple stuff, that's when the more complex stuff comes.
And we're not really talking about the defensive side of things, but that is really where the identity of the team is. I mean, they are playing so confidently and so aggressively, and with such an array of talented players that I think when you talk about the Jets' identity, you really have to talk about it there. But this is kind of an offensively focused segment, so probably not really going to dwell on it. But the fact that they are like basically 10 deep at the defensive line, they've got linebackers who are playing well, playing fast, and then this secondary, which is, playing lockdown. And I know that they are playing a fair amount of zone, and the defensive line is helping them out. But I mean, it's complementary in every sense of the word, and it's putting the offense in very good position. So, I mean, when we talk about, again, it's not, I don't think the offense is why they're 6-3. I think the offense is improving, honestly, as time goes on, aside from a fluky, I don't want to say fluky, but like probably a not consistent bad performance here and there from Zach Wilson. We'll see that from time to time, but I think they're overall improving, and I think they're going to be one of the better teams in the league. I think they're more than likely going to make the playoffs, and then the question will just be, what does that youth look like once you actually get to those truly big moments? When you go somewhere away for a playoff atmosphere, like, how do you respond to that? There's no way that I can answer that right now. But all right, so let's jump over to this. This is just a couple of clips from some of the other offenses that I think they have genuine identities. And let's see here. I think I may have forgotten to include the Ravens in this, because I had that beautiful throw to Isaiah Likely off of the quarterback sweep. But so here I have the the Chiefs, they know exactly who they want to be. I've got 2 plays here. One is basically like a quick formulated throw to Mecole Hardman, and the other one is just Patrick Mahomes doing his thing, getting the ball downfield. And this perfectly exemplifies what this offense is. They know that their quarterback is good. He's efficient. He's quick. He's accurate. He gets the ball where it needs to go very quickly, and they scheme up a lot of stuff. And then they also just rely on him to do all of this. And yes, it's a really nice play down the field by the tight end. And then here's another offense which I think really knows what it wants to be. And even though they don't have their starting quarterback, they really embrace who they are. They are a power football team. And even though they do some zone stuff, like even though they have a lot of that in their game, the mentality of power football is still very much what they do. They ride their monstrous running back. And I think, yeah, I forgot to include the play by Baltimore there to cap off the third team that I really believe has embraced their identity with the strengths of their quarterback. But those are the 3 teams. So what are your thoughts on those 3 teams as having an identity?
Well, I think Kansas City, it's taken a little bit of time here because they don't have Tyreek Hill. And I think the question last year was even, and I think it was a good thing, is it helped Mahomes prep for this year. Against too high, can he be kind of this West Coasty, be patient, don't take all the shots type of quarterback? And then when you need him to extend a play and make a throw like this, you get it still. But just be patient and wait for those moments. And he has really grown in that facet of his game, because normally, this is a play that's designed for either the cross or the flat. You're not really going to get that deep shot more often than not. It's more of a clear out. But obviously they cover it up very well. So now you're asking him to kind of do something extra. And that's, of course, where he gets his $50 million paid is there. But they have helped him along by effectively helping him work with those weapons, which are a lot of guys that get open quickly and short on intermediate routes. And the Titans, I mean, look, they are Mike Vrabel's team through and through. They are such a physical first team that, they lead the league in injuries every year because of it, which I don't know if necessarily is the best thing, but you saw it against Kansas City. The Chiefs had to match them in physicality to win that game at some point. There were important plays where they were asked to put their hand in the dirt and run the ball on 4th and 1, because at some point you get beat up over the course of a game with physicality on both sides of the offensive and defensive line. It wears down everybody. And I know people like to say, oh, they're professionals, like they don't get it. Does, like, they get tired. It happens, and you're going to be in situations where you have to come out of a full house alignment and motion and make it look like you're going to run to open up this play downfield. And even then, like, because mentally, like, this play's kind of dead. Like, it's not there at all. It really isn't. He's like one of the few guys who can make this play happen. And you're hoping guys like Zach Wilson can get to a point when they can make a throw like that. But the Titans are going to challenge you to make those plays. And maybe this is the problem with those physicality teams, is that they don't necessarily shut the door on stuff like that, but they push you to the brink of your effort has to be high level, and you have to do some pretty impressive things outside of the pocket on your own to create versus this team, both on offense and defense, taking advantage in the secondary when they give you opportunities, which the Chiefs didn't do as much. But, when you stack the box like you have to against a team like Tennessee, it's going to allow a guy like Ryan Tannehill to kind of produce maybe higher than his quality of quarterback play is. But Malik Willis obviously struggled this past week with that, which I think hurt the Titans. I think Tannehill plays, they might win that game. It's worth noting that they are dreadful at receiver, and it's a problem. Like, I honestly think watching back that game, which is one of the few games I've looked at, Willis didn't play as poorly maybe as it looked initially. I just think that they just don't have open receivers, and he's a younger guy who's not used to having to throw into these tight windows and make these accurate throws consistently.
Yeah, it was tough to ask him to go up against the Kansas City Chiefs because I think some of their defensive stuff is a little bit overblown, honestly. I think that they're a pretty good defense, and I think that they aren't a lockdown defense, but they're put in a position where they are playing from ahead for the most part, and they can rely on guys to go get after it. And I thought, considering the circumstances, considering the primetime nature of the start, and all the expectations that were there, I thought he played okay. You know what I mean? His completion percentage, it looks worse than it is, I think it was like based off of game script. But, he's got a long way to go even still. I think situationally it's hard to pile on him in any real, and be serious about it. But I do think that they have a better chance to win with Ryan Tannehill. And the last one, we're going to be joined by Kyle Trimble here in just a minute, but some thoughts on Baltimore as well, that because I do feel like they're kind of the final team that's really embraced. I think others are kind of on the verge, but all the teams that I picked out, I felt the most confident in their offensive identity. And you can also tell me if you feel like I missed anybody that you're impressed with.
Well, later this offseason, I'm going to go through a list of every team and kind of we're going to talk about where I would put every team in relation in terms of this kind of test of, do they have their quarterback? Do they have their identity? And I do think it's very offensive based. Some teams, I think, despite not having best quarterback play, are kind of in that, yes, they have an identity mold. And I think we talked about Chicago and the Jets today kind of showing that they get enough out of their quarterback play. Where was I going with this? Oh, boy.
The Ravens.
The Ravens, right, are interesting because clearly their identity is heavy run game. And I'm not certain to this point that I don't want to say it's like wrong to do that because obviously it's the correct thing. They have Lamar Jackson and they need to be doing that. But they're going a little too heavy with it to the point of like Greg Roman's offense has not really ever been a good place for a receiver to develop. And I think Rashad Payton's a very talented player. I don't know that he's ever going to be an 1,000-yard guy just because it's a strange offense, right? They don't really stress you vertically the way other teams do in that they don't really ever give you those downfield looks until they, decide on one down that they're going to, and then it's kind of out of the blue, like, oh, we're taking a deep shot. Play action, they will do that. That'll be, some of the deep shots. But even I would say like to the point of where their play action is more recognizable as a deep shot than when they're just doing drop back passing, except for in 2-minute situations.
Yeah. I mean, I think they know what they want to be. And I mean, maybe you could talk about them not being like maximum efficiency, but
the O-line isn't good enough. That's really the problem. It's like they had an awesome O-line during Lamar's MVP season. And since then, like Stanley's had a bunch of injuries. Yonder retired. They moved on from their center. Bozeman's gone. Orlando Brown got traded. Like Linderbaum's a great player, and I think has kind of been like the glue to like keep this together and give them a shot this year to contend. But without him, like I don't know where they are right now. It's kind of tough. They need to invest more at that position group than they have, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think the offense, I think they've made investments. I think they were relying on Stanley to get healthy. I think that the length of that injury is probably not really what they expected to get from him. But they're making it work. They're still in the lead for the division, and they probably will win the division. And then they'll probably have a decent playoff performance, I would guess. So we'll see if that's enough to carry them to a Super Bowl contention, or if this is just another year where they almost get there and then aren't really, just not quite enough. But all right, so let's bring in Dr. Kyle Trimble of Banged Up Bills. He is going to give us the injury report for the week. Looks like he is ready to go. Kyle, how you doing today?
Pretty good. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, first of all, I want to say congratulations. You're not a new father for the first time, but you are a new father once again, and that's super exciting and also quite exhausting. So I just want to say I appreciate your time.
Yes. So if you hear a crying baby or a kid in the background, that's the reason why. So,
Well, we definitely are more than willing to work with a little outside noise to get you on the show. So, all right. So, by the way, this is Nick, and he is the one who said that your segment is his favorite segment on the show. So
all right,
you have two fans today.
awesome.
All right. So let's jump into it. Let's start with the AFC East. Let's start with the big one. I know this is one that you want to talk about. It's one I want to hear you talk about. The Buffalo Bills have a injury to their quarterback. He has a UCL sprain in his throwing arm. And your phrasing to me was there are a lot of theatrics in the message. What exactly do you mean by that?
The NFL knows it's going to get clicks. They know that they put a breadcrumb out here, a little piece here. They know they're going to get engagement. So there's definitely some gamesmanship and theatrics to it. So they've been releasing a little bit of information in terms of, hey, he's being evaluated for UCL sprain. They use the term Tommy John. They discussed ulnar nerve involvement. They've been just throwing different things out there because they know that anything that has Josh Allen in a Twitter mention or Instagram, whatever else, is going to get clicks. So advertisers obviously like that, but I also know that the team is, I don't want to say they're playing into it, but they're also not going to say, hey, he's not going to play for the next 2 weeks. We're going to sit him out because that's going to allow teams to game plan around him, knowing that he's not going to be playing. So knowing that they can kind of let this thing kind of settle down and not give an idea of whether he's going to play or not, that's all part of the theatrics.
So, I mean, then what's your expectation? Do you think he's gonna play? I mean, UCL sprain to his throwing arm. It's impactful, I would say, at least.
At my site, bangedupbills.com, I had suspected he would miss the next 3 games, only because he missed 4 games his rookie year in 2018. You're entering a stretch of games where you're playing the Vikings, who are good, but they're NFC team. You're then playing the Browns, who are an AFC team who are underperforming. And then you also got the Lions, who are competitive, but they're underperforming too. I think they only have 1 win right now. So if you're going to enter a 3-game stretch without your best quarterback, this would be it there, because the NFC games, while they do count, they don't count as much as the AFC games. And then if you get Allen healthy for that final stretch of December, you have 3 back-to-back-to-back AFC East games. So why would you risk your guy getting out there knowing that his accuracy might be affected? The deep ball won't be there. And then if he gets hit again, you're talking there could be further, more serious ramifications if he were injured the arm further. I don't like the idea of a guy like Danielle Hunter or Myles Garrett knowing that arm isn't 100% and trying to rip it off or pressure him every chance they get, knowing that could knock him out of the game. So I'd rather say get him the rest he needs. So if he does get it hit in December, you're not going to have a bigger problem later on versus if he tries to play now.
Yeah, well, I think this is exactly how I felt coming off of that news. Like, you got to protect the longer season. I mean, you are neck and neck with both the Dolphins and the Jets right now for the lead in the division. And yes, do you feel pressure to play your starting quarterback to try and stay ahead of them and get that home field advantage in the playoffs? Of course. But you've got to see the forest through the trees, right? It is
Absolutely
better to have a healthy Josh Allen going into the playoffs, even if you end up being a wild card team, even if that does happen, because you're probably not going to miss the playoffs regardless, as long as you play the cards right. So I agree with that. Nick, what are your thoughts on the Josh Allen injury?
Yeah, you're in a wide open AFC race at the top right now, just based on standings. I think Buffalo's probably the most talented team of the bunch, but you know, you gotta, even if you get a game behind here at some point, you can still fight back and find a way back to that number 1 seed, especially if your guy's healthy, because he's your most important player. They're in a spot where they can kind of deal with a little bit of this, right? You're not entirely concerned, and the worst thing that could happen is, like you said, like he goes out there and he gets hurt and he gets knocked out for a year, and you've lost a year that the expectations are extremely high, and I think that at the very least, you're hoping that they're going to be playing games in late January. So that's, you just that has to be the goal here, and they can't be shooting for anything less.
Yeah. All right. Do you have anything else on Josh Allen, or shall we move on to the rest of the AFC East?
We'll move on because we could go down a deep rabbit hole if we keep talking about Josh Allen.
Yeah. Plus, I know as a dad of a recently sick pair of kids, I know you have a sick child at home.
Yes.
You want to get back to that. So, we could talk longer, but I will definitely try and get you moving on here. So,
I'll say really quick, I do think they could beat the Vikings with Case Keenum still. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's possible. It's definitely it's possible. Honestly, it is possible that they could go 3-0 in this stretch.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even rule that out. I wouldn't necessarily predict it per se, but it's possible. All right. So New York Jets, they are out Sheldon Rankins with a dislocated elbow. He has, a timeline of definitely missing a couple of weeks here at least, but their bye is well timed. So I think we'll kind of reevaluate what he looks like after the bye. But what is the prognosis for a dislocated elbow for a very physical position like defensive tackle?
For a dislocated elbow at his position, I've seen the reports at 4 to 6 weeks, and I do agree with that. I've seen guys such as cornerbacks. Philip Gaines, he was with the Bills one season he played. He wasn't very good, but he suffered a dislocated elbow and only missed one game, but that's cornerback position. Whereas defensive tackle position, you're engaging in blocks all the time. You're having to extend the arm. You're having to tackle. You're asking much more of that elbow, and especially that arm stretched out and even extended and bent at times to try to engage the blockers or get your tackle. You're putting a lot more stress through that. Even with a brace, you could still cause further damage there. So they need to let things calm down. Rest up. Like you said, the bye is well timed, and that should allow him to kind of get back if they can make a deep I don't want to say postseason run. I think they could make the playoffs the way they're playing, but you want him healthy if you can make the playoffs, because all it takes is one team to get hot at the right time.
Yeah, 100%. So, and is he going to have full strength after that 4 to 6 week period, or is he still going to be playing through stuff, but just getting back in there? What do you think?
He might still have some deficits, but I mean, at that point in the season, everybody's playing with something. So I think he would just be on par with everybody else.
That's true. All right. So let's see what else. I think the AFC North was our next. Remind me real quick. Bring up the next graphic. Yeah, that's right. Jamar Chase. So he has a hip injury. We haven't talked in a little while, so we're kind of behind with this one. But what's going on with Jamar Chase, and what are the expectations for him?
They had said that he's dealing with a hairline hip fracture and a torn labrum. They didn't want to put him on IR because they thought that he could heal up faster than what was normally expected. So you're looking at maybe 3 weeks he can come back, and potentially 4, but they don't want to lock him into 4, and he's doing better, especially them being in the playoff hunt like everybody else in the AFC. So the fracture is pretty straightforward. I'm not sure where they're talking about the fracture. Could be more on the crest, like where the acetabulum is, like kind of where the top of the cup is at. It could be more deeper in there, but it's not displaced the way they're talking because they didn't need surgery. So that's going to be pretty straightforward. The labrum is going to be the one that's going to give him trouble later on in the season, but having that time off to rest will help him kind of get through that there. But cutting to I believe it's the right side he has the injury on, cutting off that side, running, he's going to get catching, he's going to get pain, weakness in there at times, but it's one of those things you want to kind of gut out and just try to make sure he gets as healthy as he can be for when that final stretch is there. So my daughter wants to play football, guys.
That's awesome. You know what? Like to be perfectly honest, I am kind of grateful I'm not a girl dad, because it's just like a whole host of things I never have to worry about. But there is something special about being a girl dad. I have my 2 boys who I'm very happy.
100%.
But it's just different. It really is. And so how do you feel about his ability to high point the ball as the season progresses? Is that going to be something that he's going to be able to do effectively?
He might struggle at times, but you make it work and do what you can with it there. It's hard to say because he, how well is he going to heal up? I'm sure what the team is projecting versus what he's able to do is far different from what we're expecting there. So like when I say that is he's going to be able to play, but he's going to have problems and pain and everything else associated with that. But they're going to play it up. Oh, yeah, he's fine. He's back 100% healthy. He's not going to be. He's not going to be healthy until the offseason if he does need surgery. But the problem is, can he get out there and play at 80% and still produce? And I would take a 80% Jamar Chase over probably half the league at 100%.
All right, so let's keep moving on. And we have another AFC injury in the South. Jonathan Taylor, another injury that we're kind of behind on discussing a little bit, but it seems like he's re-aggravated it. So
Yes.
What's going on with Jonathan Taylor?
So he suffered a high ankle sprain back in early October, and then he also had a mild turf toe injury, which isn't making things easy at all with regards to his return to play, and then having that re-injury. It almost feels like a lost season. So like you have this great player, you want to get him out there and producing as much as possible, but at what point do you say, hey, let's shut him down for a while? He's not gonna be able to cut off that leg very effectively. And I think I can't remember what his stats were, but there was a fumble in there and he wasn't getting the yards, and it's a mess out in Indianapolis. So it's like you almost want to protect your best asset right now because they don't have much else besides Jonathan Taylor. So it's unfortunate, but those high ankle sprains do linger, especially in a running back like that, especially with all the cutting and pivoting that he has to do. It's really hard to get back to that fully effectively. We saw it with Saquon Barkley in the past, and we've seen that with plenty of other guys. It's not an injury that you just bounce back from.
Yeah, no, I think it probably makes sense to just try and give him as much rest as he needs, and because he's a offensive player of the year candidate pretty much any year that he's right. So why do further damage in a season where you've literally just fired your head coach and brought in Jeff Saturday, right?
That whole situation's weird. The offensive coordinator, the head coach, just everything associated with that. It's like, what are they doing at this point? If I'm Jonathan Taylor, I'm saying I'm sitting and getting myself right, because I'm not saying you go get your money. He's getting close to that point, but why would you risk trying to play through an injury for such uncertainty in that city? I don't know. Get yourself healthy, because he's
eligible for an extension after this year. So
I get healthy and say, hey, this is what I can do when I'm healthy. Why am I going to risk injury and lose out on potential millions, especially at such a volatile position at the running back position?
Yeah. All right, so we have another running back to talk about. Cowboys lead back Ezekiel Elliott has a knee injury. What's up with the star running back?
He's dealing with a bone contusion from what I was seeing. I'm sure there's some other minor damage in there that they're not talking about, but he got hit pretty hard. I believe it was week 7 because they missed week 8 and then had a bye in there. So he's still coming back through that, and he's had issues with that right knee. I believe it was the PCL sprain he had in there too. And that same side, I believe, last year. So he's just dealing with a ton of stuff. Going back to Jonathan Taylor for a second, Jonathan Taylor looks at Ezekiel Elliott and says, this is why I need to be healthy to get that big contract. I don't think Taylor's going to get the Ezekiel Elliott contract, but you want Taylor to be healthy so he can get a contract even similar to that, because Elliott cashed in when he could. He's been making great money. Now he's injured. It's like, man, you're paying all this money to this guy. Well, Elliott got paid. Good on him. So let's keep it that way in his camp. So Tony Pollard, he's a cheaper option. He can certainly do what he needs to do and hold down the fort until Ezekiel Elliott comes back. But Elliott, a healthy Elliott in January will be pretty good for Dallas.
Yeah, 100%. And I think they put themselves in a position where they already are like the number 2 team in the NFC. So they're, they don't need to press for that. Or they put themselves in a position in a weak NFC where they have a comfortable playoff spot. So I think that's probably, it doesn't make sense for them to rush anything.
Yeah. Let him rest. Yeah, let him rest. Come back when he's close enough to do what he needs to do, and then dominate in December.
Yeah. We're still on Zeke. It's just. Sorry, I had a little thing in the back I was dealing with. The Zeke thing, it's interesting to me just because if he doesn't have structural damage, a lot of the things that they'll say, at least my experience, is just like how that knee feels, right?
Oh yeah.
And sometimes that knee just like balloons up and it's swollen for like a long period of time, and you cannot play with that. So it's hard to tell. Like you said, if there's probably other issues going on because it's just complex joint. Sometimes you just have like a meniscal tear and structurally it feels different running on it, and you need like a few weeks to get used to it.
Yeah.
And they're having Tony Pollard is just like, it's huge for them, because even if Elliott's injury isn't like a long-term problem, it could be just like a situational get used to it type thing that they need to adjust to.
Yeah. And once again, go back to what I said before with some of the other teams, targeting things and whatnot, like teams are going to try to force him to, run to his right there to cut off that leg. They're going to try to, I don't say necessarily hit him and try to end his career. Not like, Willis McGahee, we saw 20 years ago, though he did come back from his, but we don't want to see them where they are, targeting him and then he's having the same problems like we talked about Josh Allen, where they're trying to just make him have more problems with that, and then they knock him out for longer durations there too.
All right, so now we have the Green Bay Packers with two notable injuries. The first one is on the side of the ball, where it just seems like they can't stand to lose what talent they do have. Romeo Doubs has a high ankle sprain. He got carted off, I believe, and it looked pretty bad. High ankle sprain it's nothing to shake a stick at, but at least it's not an ACL or a broken ankle or something like that.
Yeah, it's just injuries have been piling up for Green Bay, and you're paying all this money to Aaron Rodgers. You think he'd be able to kind of drag them through everything, but when you don't have a good supporting cast, I don't care how good your quarterback is. If you don't have anybody else to help you out with that, and you just see guys just going down left and right. I mean, they have Sammy Watkins still, which he's not what he used to be. And then you got Alan Lazard, who's coming off an injury recently. Randall Cobb's supposed to be coming back next week from his own high ankle. The talent's not there. And Christian Washington, he hasn't been playing well at all, and he's coming off a hamstring. It's unfortunate that the Packers, who are supposed to be the Super Bowl contender every year, and they are, but they can never get all the pieces around somebody to finally put it all together. And it's a mess in Green Bay. And then, you mentioned too with the Rashad Gary with the ACL. I know that they were talking about whether the turf had anything to do with that. And it's funny that the NFL came out with a study saying there's no difference in terms of injuries between the turf and the grass. I still think there's a difference with the turf, maybe to specific fields because there's different makers for that. But losing Gary, who is an exceptional player, it's unfortunate that he's going to be missing the rest of this season for a potential postseason run. And then as it stands right now, he'll be 10 months out from week 1, which is a really tight timeline, especially for somebody who has to have such a lot of movement and so many different dynamic activities required for a linebacker. So he might not be ready for week 1. And even if he is ready, he's not going to be 100% in terms of what he was before. And he's probably going to struggle early on in the first half of the season.
Yeah, that's tough. I think, we had a conversation earlier about offensive identity. I think the Packers are notably lacking that. If you want to rely on your quarterback to dice up defenses with his his arm and his brain, I guess, then you need receivers who are on point where they need to be at all times. Even if they're not making monster plays down the field, you just have to live in a very efficient world. And a bunch of young guys, and now a bunch of young hurt guys who don't have that is not a recipe for success, and it's just getting worse by the week.
You talk about the turf thing. This is something I've actually tracked very closely ever since J.C. Treader brought it up in the NFLPA meeting about getting rid of it. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but I'd be a proponent of it. I tore my ACL and a bunch of other stuff on turf, just running, just cutting. And I don't think, to get a real understanding, as an athlete, people, I think, get worried about, bad grass. They're like, oh, if you slip, you could have the same injury. It's not really the same thing, because when you slip, you kind of have this second of reaction time where your body can seize up and not tear everything up. Whereas on turf, when you step wrong, there's no give. When you feel it, you've already torn everything,
Yeah.
There's no moment of oh crap, I gotta, flex my quad so I don't bend my knee the wrong way. It's, you can brace yourself on grass. There's none of that with turf.
Yeah. But between the climates, the costs, there's so many variables that go into the reason why somebody gets turf. But it is what it is, and it's not going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it was Robert Mays I heard talking about this, and the NFL, it really is a TV sport, and it just with all of the color, it pops better for television. I mean, yes, there are thousands of fans in attendance, but there are millions of people watching, and I think that's ultimately what they're more worried about. So let's get you with the last injury here, and then we'll get you out of here, and you can go take care of all your dad duties. Again, really appreciate you. The Saints looks like have lost Michael Thomas again for what seems like the inevitable umpteenth time, and he's out with a toe injury. They do have other options, but I just don't know what's going to become of Michael Thomas.
I don't either. He hasn't played much of any football in the past 3 years. He's had the ankle injury that cost him a lot of time. He's been kind of not in communication with the training staff and the team. And then the latest injury is a dislocated second toe on his right ankle, which I believe the left ankle was let me rephrase that. He had a dislocated second toe on the right side, whereas all of his issues were due to the left ankle injury, if I recall that correctly. So this is a totally different injury. I don't know that the left ankle injury caused any problems with the right side. That might be a stretch to say that there, but I wonder if there was a type of plantar plate tear and it just wasn't get better with rest of rehab, which it can happen. But it's just unfortunate. And he's another guy who got paid and then hasn't been able to produce. I mean, it's great for his pocketbook, but I'm sure he wants to be out there and playing. But get healthy, get right, and maybe get on the same page with the training staff so that you can get back out there. There's not that disconnect with trying to get healthy for the season. But the Saints are definitely a team in transition. Sean Payton, Drew Brees leave, and then you're trying to piece together a thing to go for another long, deep playoff run, and I just don't think it's going to happen right now. So it's not a lost season for the Saints, especially in the weak NFC South, but it's just tough to see when you see such an elite playmaker, especially with the guy who I think he still has the most catches in the NFL season, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, yep. So I mean, he's electric. He can play a high level, but it's just unfortunate when you see injuries rob the league and a player of such great production.
Well, he's such a physical style of player, and it's like all these injuries don't lend themselves to, him having longevity at any point anymore.
Yeah.
It just looks like his body's breaking down. I mean, look, maybe we shouldn't be surprised when you catch like 200 passes and they're pretty much all contested and you're getting hit on every single one. This was probably going to happen, and it stinks, but I think his time with the Saints is pretty much done. He'd have to take a major pay cut for them. That's an interesting one, because if he doesn't want to leave, they might be stuck with him. I got to look at that contract, and we could talk about it more in the future, but it's like they have put themselves in a very unflexible situation with a lot of guys, and I think he's one. Because we'll let you go, and we have a few minutes before our next guest comes up, and maybe I'll talk to Nick about that real quick. And
my final thought is on that is I have friends who do more of the cap stuff, things like that, and they always say the cap is a myth. It's just like trying to pay off the credit card with one other credit card and keep pushing the bill down the line there. Well, the credit card bill is finally due, and that might kind of be what's happening with the Saints there. We're going to see it probably happen with the Packers too with Aaron Rodgers if he retires or whatever he does. But you see guys that try to mortgage the future and then it doesn't happen. And suddenly they're left with this huge bill that they can't pay. So, good on the Saints to be as competitive as they have been for so long, but sometimes your luck runs out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the cap is 100% real. The amount that the amount that it hurts you is ultimately how lucky you are in a sense, because you can always push and push and push. But if you have a player like Michael Thomas, who you've paid $60+ million to in the past few years and gotten nothing out of,
that's not a good investment.
You've put a ceiling on yourself. Yes. All right, Kyle. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you again next week. I do believe. So we will always be flexible with you and your family. But let everybody know where they can find all of your injury-related work beyond our show here.
My website, bangedupbills.com, Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, Instagram at Banged Up Bills. You can find my weekly segments on Locked On Bills on Fridays, Buffalo Late Night, and spot appearances here and there.
Beautiful. All right, Kyle. Go do your dad thing. We'll see you soon, man. Thank you again.
Thank you. All right, bye.
All right, he's here now, so we're going to bring him in a couple minutes early. We have Rashad Beard of the Panther Nation podcast to break down Thursday night football. Rashad, thanks for joining us, man. Your first-time guest, and we appreciate having you.
Yeah, what's up, fellas? How's it going? Let's get the energy up, man. It's Thursday night. Let's go. Let's talk about it.
You know what? I'll be honest. Even though the Falcons are technically in a better pole position, I am still way more interested in what the Panthers have going on. So that's why I wanted to have a Panthers representative here today. So usually what we do when we do this preview, we talk about the status of the team, where they kind of are in their season, what the expectations are for them in general, and then we kind of get into the game itself. So look, there's been a lot that's happened over the past few weeks with the Panthers. Obviously, they move on from Matt Rule. You know what I mean? That's not news at this point. But what are your thoughts on the Panthers just kind of as is in this moment?
Yeah, loaded question. So the Panthers, the Panthers are in a really weird spot. Obviously we walked away from Matt Rule, which was the right thing to do. But we are in a situation where Steve Wilkes has an uphill battle in front of him, trying to keep the job. It's highly unlikely that he keeps the job, but he's fighting for it. I mean, he's got the old school Panthers vibe to him, coming under Ron Rivera. And, that's kind of what we brought back to this team where, we're a bit more run first, smash mouth, physical team. So I mean, the Panthers really, I mean, if you're an objective Panthers fan, you look at where we are, it's really a win-win situation. Because, if we lose, you're going to put yourself in a position to, get a top pick. If you win, the division is still within arm's reach, to be honest. I mean, you win tonight, it changes some things. We were in a situation where we could have been at the top of the division just a couple of weeks ago. So if a couple teams lose here and there, you're still in it. So it's a win-win for the Panthers. I feel good about where we are from a youth perspective. We got a nice core. And to me, it's all about coaching. You got to get the right coaching here. Wilkes has done a good job. I don't know what happened last week. I got a Men in Black myself because I don't know what the hell happened last week. I don't even remember. Was there a game? Did that even happen? I don't know. So we're on to the Falcons again. So tough loss a couple weeks ago, and we're back in it. And I think this is a winnable game.
So this is a conversation that Nick and I have had. Major assets were offered up for two of your key core players, right? So hypothetically, you could have been going into the next 3 seasons with multiple first-round picks. Now, from a long-term perspective, Nick's opinion is you can't pass that up. I kind of understand that, but also if you have a GM who's in place who's still making the decisions on that, how can you possibly justify giving away all of those guys when you're fighting for your job, right? So from a fan perspective, it's probably tough to say bye to those guys, but are you more of a forward-thinking guy? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I get both sides of it. I'm the team building guy. I love the offseason. So I completely get it. I study the cap. I understand what's going on. So I completely understand, trading those guys away. But you get those picks, and then what do you do with them? We let Hassan Reddick walk last year, didn't pay him, and now we have one edge rusher that's getting a major rush. It's not that easy to replace. A guy like Brian Burns is very difficult to replace. If it was that easy, we would have had one on the squad alongside him. We got YGM draft him in the second round. Now we have multiple second round picks, but who's to say those draft picks are going to pan out? It's a risk, and it's a calculated risk. So I see both sides of it, and I'm with you, Max. Listen, if I'm the GM, I don't even know that I'm going to be around, but 2024, 2025, I have no clue whether I'm going to even be here. So I've got to play the balancing act of putting together a comparable squad to go out and win next year, so I can still stay around. I can't mortgage off too far down the line. But at the same time, you see what the Eagles are doing with these multiple first-round picks.
Mm-hmm.
You see what they're able to do with the cap space, and it's like I absolutely see both sides of it. I really do. It's a tough one.
It's tough. I mean, like if you're Brad Holmes and you're with the Lions and you trade away a player because you know you're not going to be good when you first get there and you know you have time, that's such a different situation than already having two bad seasons in the books. So you're not only are you saying, I don't know if I'm going to be here, you're thinking to yourself, if I send these guys on their way, I'm almost 100% not going to be here because we're probably going to be pretty bad. So I want to throw it over to Nick here and get his opinion on the whole thing. But I understand that the picks are very valuable, but at the same time, there's a human element here. You know what I mean? And there's a broader conversation to be had about whether you should just move on from a GM at the same time as a coach, because is a lame duck GM more potentially detrimental to the long-term organization than a lame duck coach? Because how much damage can they do aside from disappointed fans? A GM can potentially make bad trades or bad signings or not make trades in this situation. So I want to get Nick's opinion on it, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was ultimately mainly what I'm concerned about with Carolina, is that they're going to be making decisions to win next year, and I don't know that they're going to be like an 11-win team next year. And I think it's in their best interest to probably kind of put that down the road a little bit, because I do think, if they end up with a higher draft pick and they gather some resources, there are some good players in this roster. Even if, you lose Brian Burns, you have other players who can contribute. They actually have pretty good depth at a lot of positions, in my opinion. They maybe lack some of the high-end talent, but it's there, and there's stuff to build from if you get a new regime that knows what they're doing, that with a quarterback that's good. This is a team in a division that looks kind of crappy right now. Atlanta, it's maybe been the most consistent team, and they're a team that just is, their entire passing attack is just Marcus Mariota bootlegs. So I don't know how realistic that is to continue. Tampa has talent, but they got all sorts of problems, and the Saints, I think, are about to be bad for a few years considering what they have going on with their resources. So there's a window here for Carolina really to succeed, and I would be sad to see them kind of do what the Bears almost did this past year when they had a lame duck GM and they threw a lot of resources to go get a left tackle who's playing guard now, a quarterback that seems to be playing better now, and that's going to work out for the current regime potentially. But let's say Fields doesn't play well, this guy's bad and he doesn't work out. This current regime in Chicago is way behind the eight ball, because now they don't have their quarterback. They really don't have a lot of talent on that roster. It would be a concern and the reason that they don't have that talent is because they didn't have a first round pick last year. They didn't have a couple other picks that they threw away for other positions groups that they were trying to fix up. I don't know what the view is of Fitterer as a GM in Carolina. I'm not completely tuned in on his drafts and just like how well they've done overall. But and I understand why you would fire the coach before the GM. But it's just when you start making decisions strictly for short-term game and not really thinking about anything long-term is when I start having concerns about who's making decisions for any team.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the question I want to ask you about your opinion on Fitterer, because obviously the final ruling on Rule was not great. But Fitterer he's a bit more of a question, because I think, you could probably point to his draft classes and say pros and cons either way. But my kind of ultimate question is, how do you feel about their decision to not go after a guy like Justin Fields when they had that opportunity? You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the ultimate question. How do you feel as a fan about him coming back and being the GM for another offseason?
Yeah, so you have to look at this situation in totality, right? Scott Fitterer was put in a situation where he was hired after a head coach that doesn't know what he's doing. Matt Rule was hired first, right? And given the keys to the castle. So that was the start of the terrible things going on in Carolina, right? We didn't get started off on the right foot. Fitterer was playing, and so you have to look at this. Tepper also has his hand in the pot when it comes to quarterback. He's stirring the pot. He's saying, Matt Rule, you got this guy, and we got to go after Baker. We got to go after Sam. That's why you see the panic. Scott Fitterer hasn't had the true opportunity to do his job, right? So I like Scott Fitterer personally. I don't think he is the best drafter. Like the classes have been okay. We typically hit first round picks. We knock those out the park generally. And I think we're going to continue to do that. But it's the later picks, right? Those the later picks. Those are the ones we need to hit on those, especially when you talk about getting all these picks. You got to hit. You can't miss. And so I think, Nick, what you were saying earlier about the division, I think that's what their eye is on. You don't have to be an 11-win team in this division. All you got to do is win the division and you're in. And then anything happens from there, right? So if you look at the rest of the division right now, it's not good. I think we have the best young core of all the teams, right? You talk about Brian Burns, Jeremy Chin, J.C. Horn, all those guys that we had, DJ Moore, Chanel, all these guys, they're great. We just need a coach. And I feel like you don't need to blow it up because those young pieces are in place. And so I like Scott Fitterer. I think there's a plan. If you let him execute the plan and not, hamper him by getting in the way, let's see. He may not be perfect, but we haven't seen the true Scott Fitterer just yet. And I think we're on the right track. I think we can actually get this division back with the Saints not being that great. With, once Tom Brady's gone, if he ever decides to leave, it's over for the Bucs. The Falcons, I think if you look at it objectively, I really think we have an opportunity to take advantage of these lesser teams, which is why I don't think we sold the house. This is my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think it makes a lot of sense. No, go ahead.
I didn't realize that Fitterer wasn't brought in at the same time, or I didn't remember correctly as the coach. And that's also, a kind of a thing that's hurt teams in the past. I'm a Washington fan. I know all about that. You need the continuity as an organization. And, now you're in a spot where you don't know what's going on with the GM. So, yeah, I understand wanting to give the guy another year. If I'm the owner, and I know this is completely hypothetical, I think you got to communicate to your GM, like, you're going to be here for either, another 2 weeks or another 2 years. Like, let me know the timeline because it's going to change the way I operate,
Yeah, and I think Tepper's been kind of non-committal about it too. So we'll see. I think he'll be around for a couple more years though. I think you're starting to see those decisions being made. So that's just my opinion. I like Fitterer. Keep him around.
So basically, Rule came in 2020, and his draft class started with Derek Brown, and they had your Turgros Matos in the second round, and they really went. I think they had an exclusively defensive draft that year. Correct. Then 2021 comes. That's when they decide to pass on Justin Fields. They take J.C. Horn, and then this year, good player. And again, like you said, hitting first-round picks pretty successfully. And then this year, they take the tackle out of NC State, and they don't have a second-round pick because of Sam Darnold. They trade up in the third round, draft the what's his name? The kid from Ole Miss. Yeah, Corral from Ole Miss. And then again, don't have a fourth round pick, I think, also because of Sam Darnold. So
no, we did have a fourth round pick, and we took Brandon Smith. The last year's class is really kind of future. These are all project guys, so they may not have an impact immediately. They're more guys that'll have an impact next year, and we'll see. So that's what I'm talking about when we talk about team building for the Panthers. These guys, these developmental pieces, they got to become impact guys in order for us to build properly. Guys like Terrace Marshall, who's starting to come along now. I mean, we're waiting for him. There's some guys on the roster that like, hey, Keith Taylor, 5th round pick. When he's had the opportunity to play, he's been pretty good. Shi Smith, a wide receiver we got late in the 6th round last year or a couple of years ago. Another guy we need to see him come along. So I just, again, we're drafting okay. We just need to see these guys come to fruition. And I felt like Matt Rule didn't really do a good job at developing these guys. We'll see. We'll see if we can get a new coach in here. We'll see how that goes. But I think we have some young talent. Like I said, I think this division is going to be ours, man. If we can get these guys going, we're going to get it.
You got to get a coach who's ready to work hand in hand with the GM. There has to be a really good relationship there. You kind of have to let the GM choose his guy if you're going to stick with Fitterer for another year. So you gotta make a commitment. You really do. And I understand that why maybe, the owner's not being vocal about that right now, but there's going to have to be a clear decision for a multi-year timeline, I think. So, look, let's talk about the game tonight. So we're going up against the Atlanta Falcons, who are, you know, they're finding some success. I mean, to me, they are. I'm sorry to any Falcons fans. I really am. They are one of the most boring teams to watch in the entire NFL for
I
me
love the
right now.
Falcons. What are you talking about?
They are. I'm sorry. I just find them. I find them boring. I get what they're doing, but it just seems like they're 2 years deep with Arthur Smith, and they haven't really like taken a real swing at anything. You know what I mean? Like they're going to be going into their third year before they even make a real effort at quarterback. And that effort might be starting a third round pick from this past year. You know what I mean? I just want to see a big swing. I do. I mean, I just feel like they've played it too safe, and I feel like that you see that in their play on the field. I'm sorry. That's just how I feel.
Max hates 13 personnel. You heard it here first.
I have no issue with the players. I love Drake London. I mean, obviously, how can you not like Kyle Pitts? But just as a team, I find them extremely boring to watch. So, you know, as far as the matchup, though, in this particular game, this is prime time. Are we looking at Baker Mayfield taking the field again as a starting quarterback? Is that the expectation here?
No, PJ Walker starting. It's already been said that PJ Walker will be the starter. I'm indifferent. I don't think Baker's that great, to be honest. I didn't want him here in the first place, to be honest with you. But you know, he coaching and all that stuff too. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's kind of I understand why he came here and why he chose to come here. I get it. But it's not a good look. So we'll have PJ Walker. I think the biggest thing to watch during this game is going to be the weather. We do have a bit of a hurricane or tropical storm coming through, so it's going to be wet. It's going to be rainy, and so really it's going to come down to the run game. You take quarterbacks really out of the situation, and you know we haven't been able to stop the run too much over the past couple of games. So we're really gonna have to dig deep and be able to stop this run. I think they put up like 160 something yards on us on the ground the first game. Then we let Joe Mixon turn into Walter Payton last week. And so we really got to figure out how to stop this run. And that's going to be the key to the game, is stopping the run and being able to run the football on our side. So it's going to be interesting to watch. The weather's going to be is going to have an impact. I was out there earlier today. I'm in Charlotte, so it's going to be wet and it's going to be windy. It's going to be fun though. I'm going to the game too.
So, is JC Horn back? You got to forgive me because I'm a little bit behind with the Panthers.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Injury update. Is he
good.
good to go yet?
Yeah, JC played last week, and he's back. He's been playing, solid football since he's been back. Hasn't given up over, I think, 25 yards in the past 3 or 4 games. I don't think anybody's gotten over 25 yards on him. And I think since week 3, I want to say. Don't quote me on that, but he's playing well. I think the biggest concern is opposite of him with C.J. Henderson. C.J. Henderson is playing decent football. C.J. Henderson is guaranteed to give up a big play. He's also guaranteed to give up a flat. He's going to have a big pass interference call as well. Both of those are going to happen. They're almost guaranteed to happen at least once per game. So C.J. Henderson is a bigger concern. I believe Dante Jackson is the one I believe he's going to play. He didn't play much last week. I think they were holding on to him for this game. I think we missed him a lot last week. I think he helps out with the run defense, setting that edge. As small as he is, he's a really good run defender, helping out stopping that run. So I think he's going to help out. Derek Brown's also a guy to keep an eye on from an injury standpoint. He did not play the second half last week, and I think he was sick. So hopefully he's okay. And then Brian Burns, they're all going to play, but it's just a matter of watching them throughout the game. They're just kind of banged up. So hopefully our defense is going to get 100% and they play and they stick it out throughout the rest of the game. But we need those guys to show up and need them to kind of impact the game.
I feel like I have a little bit of a soft spot for the Panthers because I did a video, like film breakdown on them last year after their first 3 games when they were 3-0. And I really focused in on the defense under Phil Snow with all the simulated pressures that they were running and how fun that team was to watch. And it's been like kind of disappointing. But Dante Jackson was a guy who stood out to me at that point as well, because as good as J.C. Horn was playing early in his career, having Dante Jackson as that reliable guy on the other side, setting the edge as a run defender, and I mean, I think that's really valuable. I mean, so I'm just looking at our lad's depth chart right now, and they've got Keith Taylor Jr. as the other starting corner. So you got C.J. Henderson starting, or is it just out of date?
I don't know. CJ Henderson is starting. He's CJ Henderson, Dante Jackson, and JC Horn. JC Horn moves around. He plays slot sometimes. So it really Dante Jackson is the other outside cornerback for the most part. And then CJ Henderson is the other outside. JC plays a lot of inside. So it's just they kind of line up in these weird formations. So those guys move all over the place. But yeah, so I think the bigger concern with Dante Jackson. The biggest problem with him is he's always injured. There's always something that will take him out of the game. Like, he'll play, but he may miss a quarter or miss a half due to some sort of lower body, a foot, a leg, a toe. There's always something wrong with Dante Jackson. So that's the biggest thing with him, is getting him to stay on the field, because I think he's solid as long as he's not guarding a guy like Mike Evans, a big 6'5", really big receiver. He's okay. He's gonna have a solid pick every now and then, but we just need him on the field. Availability is the best ability, and we just need him on the field more.
So why do you think the team is having such a hard time stopping the run? Because you look at the defensive front, you've got Brian Burns, Derek Brown is a beast inside. Matt Ioannidis is like notably a run defender. Yetur Gross-Matos is a big body, like straight up strong side edge. Shaq Thompson in the middle of the field. Like, what's the problem? Is it just that these guys aren't playing together, or what?
I think it's a lot has to do with the linebacker play. The guys up front are decent. Brian Burns is solid. I wouldn't say he's the best at setting the edge. YGM is okay. And obviously Derek Brown is a beast. He's having his best season, probably the best player on our defense, to be honest with you. Ioannidis is cool. I think it's really about those linebackers. Those linebackers, they're not playing in the right gaps. They're not, it's just really bad. They can't get off blocks. So you'll see guys, they're getting up to the next level, and it's 7, 8, 9 yards a pop. That's not on the front. That's on your linebackers not coming up to stop the run. And so I think that's the biggest issue, letting guys get outside. Those cornerbacks, sometimes they can't set the edge properly. It's just a lot of bad technical football. And I think once people, commit to their job and fulfill their responsibility, you'll see better run defense. And I think we've displayed that in a couple of games. Like, we shut down a couple of guys. Like Saquon, when we played him, we shut him down pretty good. So I think you'll see tonight an effort placed on stopping the run. I think we'll get it done. We want to put the ball in Mariota's hands. We want to put him, make him throw the football, because he's not very good at it. So once we make him throw the football, I think we can make some plays. Even the last couple of games, he threw 2 picks against us. I mean, we're solid. Just put the ball in Mariota's hands, stop the run. It's easier said than done, but we really have to stop the run. I think we can keep them to about $115. I think we'll be okay. Anything over that, I think we'll lose.
So, last question before we pick the game against the spread. One of the biggest points of emphasis regarding the Carolina Panthers this offseason was the offensive line, and for good reason. Obviously, they spend a first-round pick on that. They bring over Austin Corbett from the LA Rams as well. Taylor Moton was kind of like their one cornerstone piece. They gave him an extension as well. So how has the offensive line looked, in your opinion, after these moves? And if you're going to bring in a new quarterback next year, potentially a very highly drafted one, is this offensive line almost ready for a guy like that, or do they need to make further investments to strongly solidify it?
No, our offensive line is absolutely fine. And it actually feels weird for me to say that because we have been absolutely horrendous over the past, I'd say since about 2015. No, because Cam really made the offensive line look good. We haven't really been good since Jordan Gross was around here. And that's a long time ago. Like, our offensive line play has been atrocious. And Icky has been great. He hasn't. I don't think he's given up a sack since like week 1 or week 2. He's playing out of his mind right now. He should be in line for all pro rookie team or whatever. He's been playing that great. You talk about Brady Christensen, who's been playing okay on the interior. Moved him inside the guard. Picked him up in the draft last year. I think 2nd or 3rd round pick. And then we picked up Bradley Bozeman, who we finally get to see because Pat Eflin was the starting center prior to him. He went down. Picked up Bozeman in the offseason from the Ravens. He's playing great. You got Austin Corbett, who you just talked about, and Taylor Moton has been like you said, the kind of the linchpin to the offensive line. So our offensive line is not the problem. It feels good finally saying that. And I think now is the time to pluck that quarterback in there. You go out there and you get, I don't know, CJ Stroud or, Bryce Young or whoever you want to put back there. I think it's a good time and he'll be protected. But the offensive line is playing great. Run defense, run blocking and pass blocking. They've been great. So I love it. I love our offensive line.
It's a good feeling. Honestly. Yeah, I'm a Jets fan, and I felt the same way for years that they have been so bad. They made so many investments, and finally it's come together to actually be functional. And so I feel you 100%. So I lied. It's not the last question. I just want to ask you this. As you look forward, I know what it's like when you're a team that's like, you're hoping that they do well, but you got your eye on the future for that quarterback. Which quarterback has stood out to you? Who, if you have anybody in mind this early, would you like to end up on the Panthers as the future quarterback?
I mean, I'm not really one of the guys. I watch the draft. I follow the draft. We do draft content on our channel too. So I've got my eye on all the guys. And I'm not really one of these guys to say, yo, I want the top guy, because you typically go to trash situations and end up being garbage. So I'm not one of these guys that's going to say, I need to get CJ Stroud or I need to get Bryce Young. I like both of those guys. And if we're picking top 2, I'd be happy to have them. Preferably for me, it's probably CJ Stroud right now, just because he's bigger. And he's more of a prototypical quarterback. He's got a big arm, can make all the throws. It's good vision. I like CJ Stroud. If I'm going to pick a guy in the top 2, top 3, or I have the number 1 overall pick, it's going to be CJ Stroud. But if we picked up Bryce Young, I wouldn't be mad either. He's not too small to play the game. Yeah, I don't want to hear any of that. He's a really good quarterback. Very, very intelligent quarterback. I like Bryce Young as well. So I take any of those guys. But at the end of the day, I mean, we need a lot. We have a lot of holes on this roster. And so if we ended up with a Will Anderson top 2 pick, I wouldn't be mad at that, and taking a Hooker or Anthony Richardson later, I wouldn't be mad at that either, because like I said, just because you get a number 1 overall pick or number 1 or top 2 or 3 quarterback does not mean immediate success. You got to have the right coach, and we'll see what happens. We still have Matt Corral too. We can't entirely write him off. Just a thought, but it is what it is. You get an opportunity to swing one of those guys, probably going to take it.
Yeah, I think personally, I think you got to go after one of those guys. I have come to agree with Nick that Bryce Young is the guy that you want. You know what I mean? I just think his skills are very, very, very translatable. I can be confident in that. And I'm not really a Matt Corral guy. Never have been. I don't want to write somebody off before they really get an opportunity in the league. I was just never really in on him. So I definitely would not let him stop me from drafting another guy. But
yeah, I agree. I mean, he did not look good in preseason at all. But we had Matt Rule as our coach, so it's kind of hard to, really hard to judge him. But yeah, if you get in the top 2, I'm a realist. We're probably going to pick one of those 2 guys. I'm not going to be mad at it at all, but I'm not looking at that quarterback to be our savior, because it's bigger than that. You got to put a guy around. You got to put a team around him and support him. That's the biggest thing. So we'll see what happens.
Agreed. 100% agreed. All right.
It's an underrated situation, though. You talked about the O-line. I think whoever steps in there, this isn't going to be Sam Darnold to the Jets. Like, if you get a QB, they're going to be supported, and hopefully whoever the coach is going to be, not Matt Rule.
Nah, man, because you want to trade away DJ Moore, though. You wanted those picks, right?
No, I actually did not want the DJ Moore. I had the Brian Burns.
I'm joking.
But no, I mean, it's
true.
all part of it. It's like getting the quarterback. The more picks help with that. But yeah, you can't guarantee that those picks are going to work out. You're right. I don't know. I tend to think with edge guys, we've gotten very good at scouting edge players. That's like the one position I feel comfortable with. The only issue is if you want an edge player, you have to use a first-round pick on him because we're good at scouting edge players. So if you wanted to reset a Burns contract and gain a first and second round pick, you could do that. But by doing that, you're saying, okay, we're winning in 2 years. And that's the trade-off.
Yeah, it's true. You did. We had the conversation specifically regarding Burns. We didn't talk about DJ Moore at all. And I do think I'm honestly okay with a quarterback going to a team where the defense is bad, as long as the offensive supporting cast helps him develop, because you can always build a defense through free agency.
Defense, though. I mean,
I'm just saying hypothetically.
I'm
just saying hypothetically. I told you I loved what they did last year. The majority of those guys are still there. A few key pieces like Reddick, he moved on. They had a couple interior. I know, man.
I love Reddick. So, man, he was one of my favorite players, man. He so underrated. I'm happy for him because he's back home in Philly and they're winning.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, I hate letting him walk, man. I hate it.
Yeah, so versatile, man. Really cool piece that just took a bad team a long time to figure out in Arizona. And, once they finally did, they let him go. And anyway, but, they had a couple other guys too. Like one ended up in Buffalo, and then Morgan Fox he's with the Rams now or something. Like, I forget where
I don't know where he is now.
Yeah. You had a couple cool versatile pieces, but for the most part, those guys are all still there. It would not take that much to turn this team around. You just got to get the right quarterback, the right coach, and then again,
it's coaching, man. Together, to me, it's coaching. We just need the right coaching staff in here, and I promise you, we're not that far off. I think we can legit, we can legit take this division over. And if you look at the rest of the division, with the right coach, and I prefer an offensive-minded coach. Just my opinion. We've never had one here in Carolina. We've had all defensive guys. I would love to have an offensive-minded head coach here to get the best out of our offense. Our defense is going to be fine with the pieces we have, but just give me an offensive-minded guy.
All right. Panthers are plus 2.5 underdogs at home against the Falcons. The feels were good leading up until last week. Obviously, neuralizing ourselves, as you said, forget about that game. The Falcons have not really proven a whole heck of a lot of anything, which is why they're only favored by 2.5 points, even after the Panthers coming off a rough week. It's a short week. It's a divisional game. I think pretty much anything can happen, even more so than the average any given Sunday. That's the nature of the NFL. So what do you think, man? Are the Panthers going to cover this game? Do you think they're going to outright win it? I mean, I know optimistically you would say yes, but how do you really feel?
I mean, I don't know, to be honest with you, because I don't know what version of the Panthers you're going to get. I mean, I have no idea what we're going to see. It's a short week. Obviously, we just played them a couple of weeks ago, so you don't have to reinvent the game plans. That's a positive thing. I think we played them well last time we played the Falcons. We're going to be outside. It's a little bit different. The elements are going to be at play. I think that the Panthers, I think they're going to outright win this game, to be honest. I think they're going to bounce back. We need to beat the Falcons. I hate the Falcons, by the way. That's the one team that I despise. And maybe it's a little bit of bias kicking in, a little bit of homerism there. But I got to go with the Panthers. Listen, I think it's time for us to bounce back. We got the keys up front. We got Deontay Foreman. We got the battering ram. I think we can win this game on the ground. It's just a little difficult to see, especially with the weather. The weather is going to be a factor in this game. That's something to keep an eye on. It's going to be low scoring, so I would definitely take did the under drop, because I know it was crazy. It was like 40-something points, right? 42, I think, was the last I checked. That was yesterday.
I have to look it up. I'll look it up while Nick gives his prediction for the game.
Yeah.
So you're taking them to cover if you're taking them outright.
Correct. They will cover. Yes, my bad. Long-winded answer. My fault.
No, good. All good.
Oh, man. This one, I don't know.
Do it, Nick. Come on, Nick.
Why is something playing? What's going on here?
Over under 4.
All right. Darn. 2.5. Basically, you're picking the game if it's 2.5. We're sub 3 here. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the thing is, this league right now, I just feel like whatever my gut is, I should go the opposite. So I'm not certain, but their home PJ Walker did play really well against Atlanta the last 2 times these guys faced each other. And in my opinion, we're not like far off between these two. It's just there's no real difference between 2 teams in the league right now, other than like if we're talking about Carolina and like Buffalo or Philly, like there's a clear difference between those teams. But just because Atlanta's 2 games better, the line represents here where these teams are. Like they're both decently sub-average football clubs that are going to probably give us a sloppy, fun game in a hurricane tonight. And I'm just going to lean home team because of that and go Panthers because I just, I think that they'll be more comfortable off the short week playing at home in conditions that Atlanta's probably not used to considering they're a dome.
Yep.
Yeah, it's true. But I just,
Don't do it, man.
Look,
Don't.
here's the thing. The Falcons are a better running team. And you've said yourself that the Panthers have had trouble stopping the run. Between Mariota, Cordarrelle Patterson, and whatever else that they can do, I do expect them to be able to run the ball. The problem is the Falcons' defense is not good either. So, so 2 teams that are lacking defense in bad weather conditions, it's just like this is a coin flip, like 100% a coin flip for me. So, I mean, I look, I will take the Panthers to backdoor cover because that just feels like the kind of game this is. So I'll take them to backdoor cover, a 2.5 point spread with like a missed field goal or something like that will decide the game.
We don't want to talk about missed field goals, please. Missed field goals. No field goals. Go for 2 every single time in the bad weather. Do not kick the football at all. It's gonna be windy, so I'm serious. Like I'm not joking at all. Do not kick that football. Go for 2 every single time. Don't leave it at the hands, especially of this bum kicker we got. So, and one other thing, we are debuting our all black uniforms tonight. So it's another thing that's cool. A little bit of juice, little black helmets, gonna look good, play good. So go Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just gonna take the Panthers to backdoor cover, exactly, because that is as big of a cop out as I could possibly offer you on this show right now. But yeah, look, I could see the path for either team to win this game. I really could. And again, like the Falcons are probably a little bit better overall, but I'm just so underwhelmed by them. I really am. I mean, they've been able to effectively run the ball, but it's just so one-dimensional. It's so one-dimensional. So I don't know. I mean, I think the Panthers are a real wild card going forward just because the coach has moved on and we just don't know what we're going to get out of them in any given week. But yeah, so that's my pick. And that'll do it, man. So we're going to let you be on your way. We've already kept you a few minutes over, but I just want you to let everybody know where they can find your show and everything that you guys do. Of course, Twitter and everything too.
Yeah, man. So you can go on the YouTubes. We're a YouTube-based channel. So Panther Nation Podcast on YouTube. Help us get to 20,000 subscribers, man. We're almost there. We do draft content, fantasy content. My co-host Dave, who is not here, he's also with me all the time. You can follow us at Panther Nation PC on Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff, man. So yeah, even if you're not a Panthers fan, we got a lot of content that you would enjoy. So come through, holler at Rashad and Dave at Panther Nation Podcast.
100%. And you know what? I love the draft. It's one of my favorite things about the NFL. I don't really scout players in season that much, but once we get to the off season, I love it. And so the Panthers, they might be right there as one of the main talking points. So I'm looking forward to watching your content and listening to your stuff as we get into that, because it's like, that's where it's at. Like, I don't care, Packers, maybe that's not a good example, but like, Chiefs, I don't care about the Chiefs in the off season. I just don't. I want to see the teams that are turning things around. I want to see how they're getting better. So even if the season doesn't finalize the way that you might hope, there's going to be a fun off season ahead, I think. All right, man. We appreciate you coming on the show very, very much. And I usually have guests on for the primetime teams, so I don't know if the Panthers are primetime. Are they primetime again at all this year? Do you know?
No, yeah, we definitely don't get the primetime love. So yeah, we're not again. I won't see
All
you
right, well
again
then,
if that's what you're basing it off of.
well, look, we'll talk, and we'll definitely talk to you in the off season because we'll be talking about all of that. But usually, just for the scheduling purposes of our show, we try and preview all the primetime games. But all right, man, thanks again, and we will
Yep.
talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Peace.
All right, Nick, I shall let you be on your way as well. I want to shout out Noah Ashley, our producer. You can find him at Noah Ashtray Sports on Twitter. Nick, let everybody know where they can find your work until we talk again next Thursday.
Yep, at Nicholas Sports on Twitter. Follow Gridiron Heroics. Look out for our draft prospect preview article coming out in the end. Owen McCullough should have that coming. And then you can give Gridiron Heroics a follow, as well as Sports Info Solutions, where I work currently, at least for the next few months here. Hopefully, actually, I don't know. I'll be there for a few more months. We'll see. But you can give them a follow as well on Twitter.
Right on. All right. I am Max Dean. You can find me at the Max Dean, and we will be back on Sunday for our preview show. So the idea for that is that we're going to do all of our picks like we normally do against the spread, and then the second half of the show will be focused on specific matchups. We'll be doing some more film stuff, and we'll just be getting more and more involved with the live stream with everything we do, whether it be graphics and whether it be additional video as well. But we're just kind of ramping that up as we go. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening if you are doing that after the fact, and we will see you all very soon.